Hi everyone, it's me again. So, Josh and I recorded this episode on Friday, one day before a fairly significant Donkey Kong Bananza spoiler was prematurely uploaded, then removed from Nintendo's Korean website. Now, if you want to find out what I'm referring to, assuming it already hasn't been spoiled for you across the vast, untamed hinterlands of the internet, you can click on the heavily safeguarded news story about it on https://www.dkvine.com. Suffice to say, we never had a chance to address this spoiler on this episode. But we wouldn't have, even if it had been recorded 24 hours later. I want the Kongversation to be spoiler-free for Donkey Kong Bananza, at least only discussing the information Nintendo wants out there. In the future, we could do spoiler-specific episodes that you would have to opt into, and that would certainly be the case once the game is out. But I just wanted you to know the context that, once again, a major Bananza story broke almost as soon as we put down the microphones. Ah! Hello, and welcome to the Kongversation. I'm Hyle Russell.
And I'm Josh Wallen.
Josh, buddy, let me tell you what. I haven't had a bowel movement in 3 days.
Oh, that's not good.
No, it's great. Let me tell you why that's great. Because it means my body has entered full-on E3-esque video game hype cycle survival mode. I'm running on pure adrenaline and no nutrients are going into my body. Being completely dehydrated / constipated for a week on end while you're furiously writing articles, making podcasts, looking for errant details about new video games. That is the hallmark of a good time. And I haven't felt this way since 2019. I welcome it.
Yeah, you know, my first thought was that I was going to come on here and kind of set the scene because I'm like Mr. Chronology guy, you know? I was going to come in here and talk about, man, the last time a new Donkey Kong game was announced, think of how different the world was. Think of how different our lives were. Think of how different you and I did not know each other. I knew of you, but we didn't know each other when Tropical Freeze was announced. That's how long it's been.
Yeah.
However, I should have known that the opening salvo of the show would be to talk about poop.
Or the lack thereof.
Or the lack thereof, correct.
Yeah. I love this feeling. Like, I'm probably not going to have a bowel movement until Sunday night, maybe. But
it's important to schedule them out, yeah.
Yeah, like, you know, if I'm super regular, we're not getting anything to talk about.
And so would you say, I mean, you said you haven't felt this way since 2019. How does this one compare to the lack of bowel movements that you experienced when Tropical Freeze was announced, or say when Rare Replay was announced?
So, I mean, each reveal, each big moment in our fandom is a different experience. It's like a snowflake. No two are alike. And we can draw comparisons for sure, but, you know, the last really, really big moment for our fandom was E3 2019, Banjo and Kazooie getting announced for Super Smash Brothers. And, you know, you have like lots of other stuff that happen here and there, but as far as like, this is so surreal, I can't believe this day is here, you know, we don't get those moments often, especially for Donkey Kong fans, especially for DKU fans or Rare fans or however you want to parse it out. And so this one in particular, we are now in the Donkey Kong Bananza hype cycle, Josh. And I saw someone made, I think, a YouTube comment to one of my posts on our YouTube channel, DKVine.com/YouTube, where they said, well, how does it feel to have the first new Donkey Kong game to discuss since season 1 of the Kongversation?
Yep.
Feels pretty weird. Feels pretty surreal because I've been making a good go of it. In the meantime, I've built and grown a podcast, even though what most would consider the main attraction has been MIA for over a decade. So it's a relief, but also I'm kind of feeling like, oh, it's a shame. It's a shame because I kind of took pride in how bizarre that is, in like the hustle that takes to keep something going when there's really not that much to talk about, at least from the outsider's perspective. Of course, we had plenty to talk about, and any faithful listener of the Kongversation would know that, but it feels like finally the end of an era and the beginning of a new one.
Yeah, like nobody will ever be able to doubt your commitment to DKVine, to the community, and indeed to the bit.
The bit is the most important thing. I'm a comedian at heart.
I understand.
Improv training, which I can't even really use that much anymore because I have to be the straight man on the Kongversation. When the Kongversation started out, I was the wacky comedy relief who would say just bizarre shit. And then I had to rein it in and I had to be the anchor. And it's fine. But sometimes I miss talking about my bowel movements.
Well, you're clearly not letting that stop you. I mean...
Yeah, sometimes I have to get my yayas out.
Speaking of bowel movements, Cranky on the episode art here is reminding me of the Poop Smith. That's for you, the Snake Fighter 64. I see you in the chat.
Yes, we are not live streaming this episode, but we do live stream these episodes for our $5 and up patrons. You can become a DKVine patron if you like the work we do, if you think it's impressive that I kept the podcast going for over a decade without any new standalone Donkey Kong games, or if you're just wowed by the fact that we broke this story several years before any of the other outlets. I'll think about becoming a DKVine patron and supporting independent Donkey Kong journalism and entertainment. DKVine.com/Patreon. Hello to Lawful Poe. Hello to Porygon Q, Gigastrike, Andre, Shaded Zeal, Me Muppet, March Rose, Snake Fighter 64. I'm missing people. I'm sorry. There's so many people in here right now.
I recognize Poe and Zeal from my server. Welcome.
We'll check in with the live stream as we go on this episode. So let's just launch into it, Josh, because I talked a little bit about this on our live episode with Malik on Wednesday, April 2nd, but I was still in a fugue state on that episode. I don't even remember really recording that episode because it was a blur. I've talked about the state of mind I go into whenever I see a new trailer for a video game series I love, right?
Right.
And I can't process it. I can't really comprehend what I'm seeing because I think it might have to do with how obsessive with details I get and how I extensively chronicle every inch of the game world of the games we already have. And so to just be bowled over with a solid 2 minutes or so of new footage in a new environment with new characters, experiences, sensations.
Yeah, it's it's throwing so much at you that you have trouble, your brain can't keep up with it.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, I'll get into the specifics of what it was like for me to watch it, for the first time as well as the episode goes on. But I listened to the episode from the other day and you and I experienced that. I don't know if it's quite for the same reasons, but you and I experienced like the like seeing something that we're super excited about that we weren't necessarily entirely expecting in a very similar way, because I'm the same way. It's like it starts and I'm watching it and then it feels so surreal. It feels like I'm in a dream. It feels like my brain is not quite ready to accept that what I'm looking at is real. And like, I know it's going to hit me later. It's going to hit me after a while. But like for the moment, like I always watch Nintendo Directs with my wife, Alicia. And like for years and years and years now, we've had a running joke where every single trailer comes up, I'm like, it's Donkey Kong. Especially when it is in no way definitely not Donkey Kong.
Right.
And we're so, like, me and her are like, we're very different in that, because like, a trailer for the Dusk Bloods came up, and it looked very much like Bloodborne, and she loves Bloodborne. And, of course, I said, Donkey Kong? And it's obviously not Donkey Kong.
Yeah.
But when she realized what it was, she started freaking out, and she starts going, don't do this to me if you don't mean it! And she's, like, standing up and, like, jumping around and stuff. But when like Donkey Kong made his appearance in the Bananza trailer, I was just sitting there with this very neutral expression on my face, and she thought that I wasn't excited. Cause like, it's gonna take me a minute to process it.
Yeah.
At least a minute.
Yeah, so I talked about it with Malik. I vaguely recall what I said about the trailer, at least. And as the direct progressed, I started wondering. I started having a feeling. Call it a sixth sense, if you will. Because knowing what I knew about this project, that several years ago, Donkey Kong was taken in internally at Nintendo EPD, I always knew this was a possibility. But of course, I don't want to raise my own expectations, but more importantly, I don't want to raise the community's expectations. Once upon a time, I would have gone cock out into every Nintendo Direct saying, we're going to see 18 DKU games today, folks. And we're going to see a new Diddy Kong Racing. We're going to see 3 Donkey Kong games, a 3D platformer, a 2D platformer, and a racer. We're going to see Banjo-Kazooie crossing over into Donkey Kong.
And then you would have gotten very, very mad at Shigeru Miyamoto when that didn't happen.
Yeah, no, I mean, it would be a bit, it would be in jest, it would be good-natured enthusiasm going into it, but what happened then...
Oh, I thought we were talking about, like, 2001 Hyle, not, like, 2014 Hyle.
Honestly, even 2014 Hyle still did this a little bit. Yeah, this is the more mature, seasoned, responsible Hyle of really the entire time this game has been in development. But it really did, just like, even if you're joking, even if it was all in the rah-rah go team kind of like sports mentality of we are team Donkey Kong, we are team DKU, it's all in good fun, it would then create animosity every time you'd see a Fire Emblem game get announced instead. And, so I went into this one trying to lower expectations for everyone, like in our inner circle Discord server. I was about to do a social media post where I was like, just look, like Donkey Kong is still coming, but we might not see it tomorrow, and that's okay, because there's going to be more than just a handful of launch games for the Switch 2, although with tariffs, we'll see. Right. And, we won't necessarily have to put all of our hopes, all of our dreams onto tomorrow, but as the direct was going on, I started like crunching some numbers in my head. I started like comparing what was being shown to what could be shown, what would be redundant if it was shown. And I sort of realized about 30 minutes into the direct, there very well might be a chance they're going to close with Donkey Kong. And that really started setting in when we started see other Nintendo IPs accounted for at various times in the direct. So when the trailer started, when the one more thing conclusion to the direct started, we started to see all these landscapes that weren't really Donkey Kong-esque as we know it, you know? They were cartoony, and I told Malik, I thought maybe it was like going to be something wild that nobody had called, like Mother 4. I don't know,
See, this is hilarious because on this one, I did not do my usual "it's Donkey Kong" joke because I thought it was like, for whatever reason, I looked at that landscape and I was like, nah, it's not Donkey Kong.
But
that's okay.
But the blood game,
well, see, it's the less it looks like Donkey Kong, like when there's absolutely no possible way that it could be, okay, that's when I go for it.
Gotcha. So, yeah, like, I saw that minecart on a minecart track, and I was just like, And then, of course, I saw the monkeys with pickaxes, and I'm like, oh my God. Like, I started cackling out loud. That's my go-to reaction. It's like, I can't verbalize what I'm seeing. I can't go like, oh! I laugh, usually.
See, I missed the minecart the first time. When I saw those monkeys, though, that's when I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
And then, like, Doomsday punching through his underground cell to kill Superman. Here was Donkey Kong bursting through the wall, and I felt elation, but the primary emotion I felt, and I've never felt this way before, relief.
Mm-hmm.
Because, Josh, as you well know, because I had you on the episodes, DKVine has been covering this story for years now. And the reality of Donkey Kong EPD finally being confirmed, to finally have that vindication, it's such a closing of a book for me, because people are not supposed to know these huge internally developed Nintendo projects that take years of time. They're not supposed to know it that far in advance. I was incredibly privileged to have this information, but it unfortunately blew up in my face a couple of times, because when people start hearing about a new Nintendo game, they usually start hearing about it in the 2 weeks before a Nintendo Direct or something. And people were expecting this game years ago, but it was just early days development. And so it's a huge feather in a cap for DKVine. And I hope people will actually take us seriously now that we're not just spinning fables.
You said in the last episode that you didn't want to, like, I don't remember the exact verbiage you used, but you didn't want to toot your own horn too much because, you know, it's DKVine. You don't want too many flowers. I'm not on the DKVine staff, so I can tell you congratulations, well done.
Thank you. I'm like I said, it's just, I no longer have to be the emotional caretaker of the fandom at all times, where I have to reassure everyone that this is coming. This is coming. I look like a crackpot, where because none of the big outlets are talking about this. None of the supposed leakers who make far more money than I do with their Patreons, none of them are talking about it. The only time they talked about it was when those leakers became DKVine patrons so they could listen to live conversations, crib everything I was saying, and then spin it as their own information.
Yeah, and also, I've seen, you know, I always see, like, bingo boards going around of things that might happen in the Direct. And I take it a little bit personally because, like, why aren't you guys talking about Donkey Kong? Why don't you, it doesn't even occur to you that a Donkey Kong thing could even happen?
Or a major Donkey Kong thing that is, I mean, with Mario Kart World, effectively the selling point of the new system. It's something we have been saying since 2017, 2018, when I first started noticing something was up. And I actually did some investigative journalism. And I started reaching out to sources, and I started putting pieces together. And I realized Nintendo was gearing up for something big with Donkey Kong. And not in the way they had been treating Donkey Kong since 2002, since the Rare buyout, where Donkey Kong is just this thing that they're going to give to studios because they don't have time for it. Because Rare was the one who developed the modern Donkey Kong, and now Rare can't do it, at least as the standard bearer anymore. So we've got to give it to Nintendo EAD for a one-off, Namco for rhythm games, Payon for beloved by fans but criminally overlooked peg swingers, and then of course Retro Studios. But then when Retro Studios moved on to their own project before that fell apart, and then moved on to Metroid Prime 4, it's like you can't just sit around and wait for Donkey Kong. Like you've got to keep Donkey Kong in development, because Donkey Kong actually is important to Shigeru Miyamoto. Donkey Kong is important to Nintendo. They have a lot of money invested in Donkey Kong at the moment, and more than that, it's just financial sense, because when you look at how Donkey Kong games have actually sold, outside of a few errant anomalies that are mostly due to outside circumstances like the Wii U underperforming, Donkey Kong games have always sold extraordinarily well. Like more than Metroid. And I'm not trying to turn this into another pissing war between Donkey Kong and Metroid fans circa 2013. We both had games shown off in the last week. They both look great.
Yeah, Metroid fans and Donkey Kong fans, and I count myself among both of those groups. Everybody's eating good now.
Yeah. 3D Mario fans are a little salty right now.
Nintendo has forgotten Mario.
I made that joke. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that reference. So this is another thing that was kind of burning me up a little bit, just because maybe I was taking it personally. I try not to let this kind of stuff upset me, and I don't vanity search or anything. So it's not like I'm like Googling myself to see what people are saying, but I do take it personally that people had no faith in my reporting. And why would they? I mean, we're DKVine. What have we broken aside from two major news stories, related to Donkey Kong? Like, we haven't. I get it why we are just looked upon as a goofy fan site and not, an IGN. And of course, then the situation with this game back in 2021, when those so-called leakers took my information, spun it as their own, but said it was coming at that E3, or it heavily implied it was, and then it didn't happen. I understand why people stopped believing in it because of that, because of the way they were exposed to the information. But I guess I took it personally that everybody was just like, well, it has to be 3D Mario. It couldn't be Donkey Kong. But not only just personally as a Donkey Kong journalist, I took it personally as a Donkey Kong fan like you, Josh, because why couldn't it be Donkey Kong? With the theme park, why wouldn't Donkey Kong make the most sense with all of the renewed attention the series had since the Super Mario Brothers movie, which I realized was a Mario outlet first and foremost, but they devoted 1/3 of it to Donkey Kong. Why would they do that unless they were conditioning people and getting them ready for this?
Oh, no, and I absolutely agree. But you've also got to remember, I guess, that, like, we're thinking about this and we're putting the pieces together and we're reading the tea leaves, which turned out to be correct. We're doing all of this as Donkey Kong fans. I think there's this is something that you and I have been talking about for years and years and years, since before, like I said earlier, we even knew each other. We were thinking in this way. There's an enthusiasm gap there. There's the people a little older than us who think of Donkey Kong as, the arcade, first and foremost. And then there's the people a little younger than us who grew up with Donkey Kong on the GameCube and think of him as like this ancillary Mario character. Mm-hmm. And aside from a late era Wii release, DKC Returns, and a fantastic game on Nintendo's, worst selling video game home console ever, Donkey Kong has not been positioned in this prominent of a role as he is right now since at least Donkey Kong 64.
Yeah.
And how fucking lucky are we to be here? Say what you will about the game, but how, like, to wait this long, like you were saying earlier, you first started talking about this around 2017, 2018. The game likely entered development around that time, and having now seen the Treehouse streams, like, I can see, like, the results of the fact that it has been in development for such an incredibly long time.
Yeah. Yeah, like, for one, it feels apropos. You said Donkey Kong 64. It feels apropos that we are then re-exploding Donkey Kong's prominence with what very much feels like the successor to Donkey Kong 64. I mean, it's the first new 3D Donkey Kong game since Donkey Kong 64, but there are also several little homages and nods to DK64 in this. It feels very much like they're consciously calling back to it, which is delightful. And yeah, like, I've been privileged to have this information, and I've been privileged to share it with our readers, our listeners, our viewers, our followers. And, you know, I'm glad I could help quell the panic in Donkey Kong fans and to maybe keep the candle burning a little bit for the true believers and for those who discovered us. You know, like, hey, good stuff is coming for Donkey Kong. And I know it's just like, trust me. But now that you know you can trust me, imagine what I'm going to break next, Josh.
Right. Yeah, and I think also, you know, I mean, of course, you told me some details about this, like, well before you you broke it publicly. So, like, the inner circle of DKVine, I guess, has known some things about this for a long time. And of course, I had good reason to trust you on this stuff. That said, I do think even without that, even setting that aside, as a Donkey Kong fan, reading the, like I said earlier, reading the tea leaves and seeing the Mario movie and the new design in the game that turned out to be Mario Kart World.
Yeah.
Like, there were a lot of very positive signs, much more so than usual, that, like, this really could be it right now. Mm-hmm. And I had a good feeling about it going into the Direct. I wasn't like, I wasn't like pinning all of my hopes on it. I wasn't going to be, devastated or anything if we didn't see it, but I was like, it feels more likely than it usually does right now.
Yeah, honestly, so did I. I've been so measured and cautious, especially after the fake leakers stole the information in 2021, that, I saw what happened there, and that exploded beyond my reach. Like, I couldn't control the narrative after that point. Mm-hmm. And so that was a very demoralizing. I mean, I was getting death threats that day, Josh.
Hate that shit.
Yeah, people were threatening me because there wasn't a Donkey Kong game announced. How do you feel now, motherfuckers? Anyway.
Hyle's delays are not Hyle's denials.
Here we are, Josh, and we got to talk about it. First of all, I want to know your thoughts about the way the game looks, about the trailer. Like, how are you feeling, Josh Wallen, from Off of the Geek Critique?
So, like I said, when I first watched the trailer, my initial reaction, as soon as it popped up, this is really funny. I don't know why I got this, but on that first shot, I think it was seeing like a rock with eyeballs. Yeah. And for some reason, my brain said Pikmin.
Oh, well, that makes more sense than Mother 4. I'll grant you that.
I would have been more excited about Mother 4 than Pikmin, but yeah.
Like, I saw a lot of people saying they saw the googly-eyed rocks and they thought, like, Banjo. They thought Rare, first and foremost.
That's actually what Alicia thought. That's the first thing Alicia thought. I don't know, like, I'm not a Pikmin fan. I don't know why my brain went to Pikmin, but for some reason, that was the very first impression I had of it.
Look, I'm only a fan, truly, of Donkey Kong and 3 specific Star Fox games when it comes to Nintendo's IPs and what they own. Like, obviously, I know quite a bit about Mario because Donkey Kong shows up in those sports and racing games and party games. Right. But, like, yeah, like, I don't really know much about anything. So my brain just went to Mother. like a Rorschach test, right? But I just wasn't thinking Donkey Kong until I saw the minecart, and of course then I saw the monkeys, and I knew it was Donkey Kong.
And I think that speaks to the environmental design, at least of the part of the first couple of, we got those sweeping vistas at the very beginning of the trailer. Mm-hmm. I think that speaks to how obviously different this looks than either Rare's games or Retro's games or anything that Donkey Kong has done before. And now that we have more context for where the game takes place and what's going on within it, that makes a lot more sense than it did at the time. So the trailer goes on, Donkey Kong shows up. Like I said, I'm just sort of sitting there in a bit of shock. Alicia is next to me going, "It's Donkey Kong!" And I'm just like, but is it? Is this real? Is this really he's wearing pants. Donkey Kong doesn't wear pants.
A lot of people got hung up on that. He's wearing clothes that more than just a tie. And I'm like, Donkey Kong's wore clothes before, though. This.
True, yeah.
For me, I still think of Donkey Kong in his Skylanders Evel Knievel jumpsuit. And right. That's still pretty, contemporary for me. So I'm just like, yeah, Donkey Kong sometimes wears more than a tie, weirdos.
I think my first watch of the trailer, like you said earlier, it's throwing so much at me so fast that I don't have time to process any of it. Mm-hmm. I was sort of two minds about it because I was there was a part of me that was fuck yeah, Donkey Kong EPD is finally here. It's so fucking good to see it. I'm so excited to have this to talk about and have this to learn about. And then there was also a part of me that was but how is the fandom going to react to this?
Oh yeah.
And for that matter, yeah. How am I going to react to this? Because I didn't have enough information to answer either of those questions.
So after the initial elation and relief kind of give way, and of course I can't really process what I'm seeing, so I'm not really thinking this coherently at the moment. But
right
about halfway through the trailer, you start having the jungle beat scaries. The oh god, where is anything recognizable? Oh God, where's Diddy? Oh God, I don't see any Kremlins. This is going to be a scandal.
Exactly. And yeah. I think the 20 years ago trauma of Jungle Beat affected the diehard, the freaks, basically, the Donkey Kong fans who are really in too deep on it. Because among more casual Donkey Kong fans, among people who just loved Donkey Kong and wanted a new Donkey Kong game, I didn't see so much of that. They were just hey, it's finally a new Donkey Kong game. This is great. Like my wife. But I think just us having lived through Jungle Beat, or for younger people who know the story of Jungle Beat, it's so easy, especially with an internally developed Nintendo Donkey Kong game, to let those Ghiblies get to you.
I called it trauma, and that's way too loaded of a word.
That's true, yeah.
It's something akin to this lingering psychic turmoil
right.
in Donkey Kong fandom that's never completely healed. Or at the very least, it's still an easy to afflict pressure point where you hit it just right and we crumple. And yeah, I was starting to get that with this trailer. So I think the relief and elation carried me just a little bit above the Jungle Beat scaries. The fear that this was just another blanket reinvention, which, by the way, I have to say didn't line up with what I had been hearing about it. So I'm just this something's not adding up here. I'm going to wait and see, but I know for a lot of the people, the freaks, as you call them, the ones who are in the most deep for Donkey Kong, they say their excitement of the trailer was definitely blunted because of that, and maybe it's not even a personal thing. It's just the fear of how other people are going to react and the discourse in our fandom from here on out. And what should have been a huge rallying moment, the biggest moment for Donkey Kong fandom in years, it was kind of, I don't want to say ruined, but it was definitely dulled a little bit.
It was dampened, and I think that's a really interesting thing because, like, you know, you said it's not entirely how you react. It's thinking about how other people are going to react. And it was such a strange feeling because I didn't entirely know where the line was. Like, how much of this is how I actually feel and how much of this is me thinking about how other people are going to actually feel.
Yeah, it's both my own empathy for others, but it's also knowing that my job is an emotional guardian of of how people feel about Donkey Kong. And like, I don't want to be out here making excuses for Nintendo. And there was like a couple heated moments in our inner circle when this was being shown off where it was just like, how can you enjoy this? Like,
right, I know.
And, you know, I try to keep an open mind and I try to not just like come into everything ultra cynical anymore. At least, let me reframe when it comes to entertainment. When it comes to media, because all entertainment, all media is voluntary. If I really hated something, I just don't have to watch it. I just don't have to play it. I can just tune it out. And it's hard to do when my job is Donkey Kong journalist and razzmatazz showman. You know, I can't just tune this game out, but I didn't completely hate the way it looked. I have to say, like, I was skeptical, but there was a lot I liked about it. And of course, there were moments that helped, like the segment shown in the trailer, which hasn't been seen in any of the demos or the Treehouse presentations of the demo of the Donkey Kong Country style 2D section.
Yeah, right. Like I said, the trailer was all happening so fast that until I came to it was either Blue Sky or the Inner Circle, probably both, and saw you talking about that, I hadn't even clocked the fact that like just how much that looked like the Rare aesthetic.
The Rare ACM aesthetic with
exactly.
Josh, you coined it, and I've used it a couple times in the last day or so. Dithered plastic.
I thought you got that from me. I've heard you say that, yeah.
The dithered plastic palm trees. Seeing them back at a time, like, I've made a lot of bold predictions about Donkey Kong in the past 8 years, 7, 8 years or whatever. I never would have called the dithered plastic palm trees returning. Never. Never. That wows me. Like, I'm like, holy shit. And so I think that was enough to make me say, and of course the presence of the neon barrel cannons, it was enough to make me say,
I love that. I love that aesthetic. I always love, you know, the whole neon casino aesthetic is one of my favorite, like, level archetypes in video games. Thank you, Sonic the Hedgehog 2.
Thank you, ukulele.
And ukulele. But gotta make everything about the DKU, Hyle.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. I have to make everything about Sonic. I understand. But yeah, I love that. I will say though that there's a world in Mario Odyssey, and I'm trying to remember which kingdom it is. I think it might be called the Lost Kingdom, but it's been a while. And it's a pretty small island, but the whole island, like, the trees and, like, the way that it's rendered is very much, like, reminiscent of that ACM aesthetic. Mm-hmm. And I've always wondered how much of that was intentional.
Well, as my reporting stated, the people working on this game are apparently made up of quite a few very big Super Donkey Kong fans, as they would know the game. And I think that's the biggest shift in company culture from when Nintendo EAD was doing Jungle Beat and Nintendo EPD is doing Donkey Kong Bananza, is that so many of the people making this game actually really love Rare's Donkey Kong. And I know that gets lost in just the surface level, like, oh, they changed Donkey Kong's design. Donkey Kong looks a little bit more like the Donkey Kong 94 design. Oh, they hate Rare. Oh, they're taking everything away. Oh, I don't see any recognizable characters in the trailer. I get that. Like, if you weren't plugged into all of the news and all of the reporting about this game, you would think that. Especially if there's any lingering Jungle Beat psychic turmoil, right?
Right.
But yeah, like, honestly, again, we should have known something was up with Odyssey and all the references in New Donk City.
I tried to tell you in 2017.
No, I mean,
to be fair.
Yeah, that was part of our reporting eventually, but like not putting the pieces together then before we even knew anything concrete about what was happening. And like, that was almost like a primal cry from Nintendo EPD. Ooh, we got Donkey Kong back. We can't wait. Which is why I was cautiously optimistic that this trailer was but a brief snapshot and that this game will actually be full of appearances, references, callbacks, and just really rooting itself in Donkey Kong history in a way that really Donkey Kong games haven't been allowed to do outside of Payon since the Rare era.
Just since we know, or at least we believe this does, this so obviously has so much of the DNA of Mario Odyssey in it. Of course, we don't know the exact, the team makeup necessarily, but knowing how the rollout for Odyssey went, the first Odyssey trailer was actually pretty reminiscent of this. It showed Mario, jumping out of the sewer grate. And then it showed some gameplay sections, and it didn't really give too much away about how deep the references would go, about, anything beyond really New Donk City. And I think knowing that did help, temper at least how I personally felt coming out of the trailer, is that, okay, the important thing is that Donkey Kong is back, and how crazy is it, this is what I was thinking day of, a Donkey Kong game got to be the one more thing at the end of a console reveal. Regardless of anything else, this is monumental for the brand and the franchise and the series and what it's going to be and what it's going to mean going forward.
This is the moment we have all been hoping for the last 23 years, Josh. This I understand how beaten down Donkey Kong fandom feels, especially the old timers. I get it. This is what we have been advocating for. Why not us? Well, why couldn't it be us? Honestly, the biggest thing holding Donkey Kong back since the buyout has been that lack of stability, the lack of a stable development home. Retro Studios did great carrying the torch for a while, but they were never capable of having the same amount of output for Donkey Kong that we came to become accustomed to under Rare, or that Mario or Zelda or Kirby enjoy. Right? So I think that just having it have that stability, having it be a home, and having it be a Nintendo EPD, it's a huge relief, because no matter what, we're probably not going to have to wait another 11 years for a brand new game to be announced.
I think what I decided for myself personally, of course, once the trailer was over, I poked in on my own Discord server. And like I said, I think that was an interesting sort of contrast as far as what I was saying is I was like more casual Donkey Kong fans versus the freaks. Cause, in my server, there were some people who were a little wary and there were some people who were very excited. But then of course I looked at the inner circle on DKVine, and people were so much more emotionally volatile on both sides. And understandably so. That's where the freaks live,
That's where they dwell,
I say freaks very affectionately. I'm saying freaks the way that Tony Khan calls his own fans freaks.
Yeah. It is, of course, the more passionate you feel about something, the more unhinged your reaction will be one way or another. And of course, trying to train myself to be more neutral when it comes to the DKU. It's been hard. It's been challenging. And of course, I still get carried away by the giddy enthusiasm. Now, I do succumb to disappointment every so often. And those times are usually when I do feel like there is something keeping people in the industry back from celebrating what we love. I feel that disappointment whenever, like, Rare would announce something for Sea of Thieves that, oh, we're crossing over with Monkey Island. And I'm just like,
no,
okay.
I remember that. That was last season, I believe, wasn't it?
It was 2 seasons ago at this point, yeah.
Well, I mean, in terms of seasons of the Kongversation.
Yeah, so do I.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, I remember when that happened, and, you kind of had that episode where you were talking about that, and you were talking about the lack of Donkey Kong news, and a couple of other things. And, like, the thing is, in, like, some of that, and I'm saying this both, like, as, your friend, and also as, like, the way that you run DKVine, like, I think some of that is just extremely healthy. It's okay to let yourself be disappointed. Like, it's okay not to let yourself feel like you always have to be the steward of good times, especially when times are not looking so good. And I remember listening to those episodes and just finding it actually very cathartic to hear somebody else verbalize what I too had been feeling.
Yeah, because I'm like, Rare, like, I know the people at Rare found the Monkey Island games to be foundational and really inspirational, but it's like, Rare, I love your games. Why aren't you doing more with your games in this, like, game I love, Right. And it's same thing, like, when they announced Donkey Kong Adventure, or really specifically, I remember was when they showed it off at E3, then, later that year, it was like, just seeing, like, oh, like, they've just completely reinvented the environment for Donkey Kong. There's no recognizable anything in this. And I remember just thinking, like, why do they always have to reinvent Donkey Kong's world when he's got a perfectly good thing going that fans of his love? And you just can't help but feel like there's some stigma around Rare and Donkey Kong, where it's like the narratives that's set in the buyout era are, like, internalized by not only people in the industry, but by Rare themselves. I don't know. Like, that's the only time I feel really, really down when it comes to this. With something like Donkey Kong Bananza, there's just enough in there to give me hope. And yeah. I know a lot of people downplay hope these days. It's cringe to have hope. It's copium. That's what it is. It's like you are deluding yourself, you moron. And
it's about video games. Who gives a shit? Be happy.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much more to worry about in the world right now than our entertainment. And I do understand when we want that refuge, when we want that escapism, to not have something that perfectly aligns with what you were hoping for, especially a game we have been looking for, you can say 7 years, you can say 11 years, you can say over 25 years since the last new 3D Donkey Kong game.
What I'm saying specifically is people who are calling other people cringe.
Oh, yeah.
Like, be disappointed, that's fine. But don't get mad at other people for not feeling the way you do.
I completely get the disappointment with this, Josh, because when I was sitting around daydreaming about a new Donkey Kong game trailer, a new 3D Donkey Kong game, because we were pretty sure it was going to be 3D, you sit around thinking about it, and your mind daydreams, what's the ideal trailer? What's the best possible scenario? And when enough time passes where you still don't get the game, that fantasy becomes reality in your head of what it needs to be, what that game needs to be to be the thing that you've been waiting for, you have been hoping for in your hobby, in your fandom. And so to have something that seems initially so offbeat or on jungle beat, then it's discouraging and it's deflating. And you're like, I wasted 7 years of my life. I wasted 11 years of my life. I wasted over 25 years of my life since the last new 3D Donkey Kong game for this. So I do get it, and I do completely understand, and yes, empathize with those feelings. And I have to admit, I was skeptical at first. Even when I was recording the episode with Malik, I was like, I'm happy. I'm relieved. And I think there's a lot of things that look cool about it. But I don't know enough yet. And I honestly, I'm not sure how I'm feeling right now.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I ended up, like, once I rewatched the trailer and I kind of, there were a lot of parts of it where I was just literally going frame by frame, like, breaking down the details and taking it in. And what I decided on, after all that was like, okay, the most important thing is that Donkey Kong is back. And that Donkey Kong is being positioned as the single-player franchise for the launch window of a brand new video game system.
Yeah.
And how remarkable is that? But I also felt a little apprehensive about it. I felt a little unsure. And I realized the trailer hadn't really shown us all that much one way or the other. So I walked away saying, okay, well, I'll take a wait and see approach. There's months before this game comes out. We're gonna learn a lot more about it. That said, the primary thing that I came down on was just, if I had seen Diddy, I think that all of that apprehension would have went away.
Yeah, I often think back to the day Returns was announced in 2010. And of course, we all remember, all of us who were there remember exactly how it went down. If you listen, you can hear it coming. But I remember having the jungle beat scaries in the first half of that trailer. Like, of course, there were moments where I was like, oh yeah. Like when Donkey Kong's swinging on the vine. I'm like, yeah. But it was when Diddy showed up that it was just like, oh, fuck yeah. Oh yeah. There he is. We don't have to worry at the very least. Because the thing I always said about Jungle Beat, I could have accepted so much about Jungle Beat if only Diddy had been in it, or there was just something else besides Donkey Kong and the banana.
Right.
And it's not like I'm not game for new stuff. It's not like I can't accept and embrace and celebrate the new. It's not like I just want to see the greatest hits from the series, from my childhood, repeated again and again and again. But I do want the world celebrated. I do want there to be a healthy mixture of old with the new, and really then adopt the new as part of the fabric of the tapestry of the old. Like, the point I always go to, compared to the way Returns introduced their Retro's new characters versus how Payon did it, where characters in, obviously DK Jungle Climber is in no way as culturally significant as Donkey Kong Country Returns to the broader gaming world or even casual Donkey Kong fandom. But to the hardcore freaks, Josh, we look at a character like Xananab, and Xananab is as revered and beloved as any Rare character because he was introduced in a game full of Rare characters that celebrated that legacy. Whereas Returns, the only returning characters, Donkey, Diddy, Cranky, Rambi, and Squawks, and then it's just like, oh, Professor Chops, or as we knew it at the time, Tutorial Pig? What the hell? What the hell? Like, you're even afraid to reference Donkey Kong Country in the background of this game, and you're
that is called Donkey Kong Country.
Yeah. So I think that's the difference, is how are you presenting the new? Now, that being said, one thing about the trailer that I was holding on to was recognizing patterns with Nintendo, and specifically Nintendo EPD, and how they treat properties under their purview, how they treat Mario, in fact. And you mentioned the Mario Odyssey, that initial trailer that really was just plunking Mario down into the strange and unfamiliar. And really, that has been the modus operandi of 3D Mario, with all 3D Mario games starting with Sunshine. We're going to put Mario in a strange, far-off area away from the Mushroom Kingdom. And it's going to be full of, like, some familiar elements, of course, but it's going to be a little disorienting and bewildering at first. And characters will show up throughout, but it's going to be rooted in a new aesthetic and vibe. And then, of course, fans grow to love it. But yeah, like that first 3D Mario game, Super Mario 64, it's the only 3D Mario game that really plays in the world we think of when we think of Super Mario.
Well, at least aside from like 3D World and 3D Land.
Okay, Josh, I have to be honest.
But those are different types of games.
Yeah, I'm not really counting those. When I say 3D Mario, I'm referring to Super Mario 64, Sunshine, Galaxy 1 and 2, and Odyssey.
Right.
So thinking about this, like, we all wanted that 3D Donkey Kong game that was set on Donkey Kong Island, that had, a lot of very, very traditional iconography in it. But we did get that. It's called Donkey Kong 64. And I can't help but think, especially with the way they're referencing DK64 throughout this, the team is viewing that as Donkey Kong's Super Mario 64. Well, we did that. It was done. Even if it was done by another team, and it's quite controversial to this day for the execution, It's been done. And that ignores the whole psychodrama behind Donkey Kong fandom, everything we felt since the buyout, and everything we felt we needed, or maybe even were owed a little bit, especially with this big new opening salvo in this new era of EPD developed Donkey Kong. So to keep that in mind, I was like, okay, this might not be a Jungle Beat situation. We might just be misconstruing it based on our own past experiences. I think the more apt comparison is 3D Mario, and specifically Super Mario Odyssey.
Absolutely. I think that's sort of a funny thing, though. Like I said earlier, among the freaks, the most revered thing, so it's sort of our equivalent of like the one that got away is, of course, Donkey Kong Racing. And the thought that we could see the very locales that we loved in the country games and the land games and Diddy Kong Racing and see them, rendered in 3D on, extremely powerful for the time hardware. And then we never got that. And I think that's part of it. It's like, we've seen the Mushroom Kingdom in 3D. We saw DK64, but I think because DK64 was so controversial and also so long ago, like even in the GameCube era, it wouldn't have been, I don't think we would have been disappointed if another game had been set on or around DK Island even then.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point about Donkey Kong Racing, because it feels like we've never really healed from the buyout era. Or the buyout itself. The buyout itself, that was really just this blow to our fandom and to, everything we thought we knew, everything we thought we could expect was yoinked from us. And it would have been one thing if we had never seen Donkey Kong Racing. If we had never been tantalized with that trailer, if it hadn't shown up on the back of the GameCube box. But we were shown it. We did feel like our time is now. Like this is happening. And to have that pulled from us, I don't think we ever really got over that. And then it did start a really tumultuous period where we suddenly found ourselves on the defensive, and we had to justify being Donkey Kong fans to other Nintendo fans, to the larger gaming media at the time. Even with returns announced, you still got that. You still got people shit-talking the original Donkey Kong Country games. You got Nintendo Power saying, thank God they got rid of all those stupid Kongs. And it just focuses on the core elite. And it's just like, really, Nintendo Power? Like, you're supposed to be the propaganda outlet that I feel safe with.
Yeah, I think it has been nice, and I'm sure this is happening somewhere. I've intentionally tried to unplug from a lot of the discourse nowadays. But I haven't seen any major outlets, at the very least, going on about how, anything equivalent of like, oh, this should have been Mario, this should have been something else,
Nintendo's big Switch 2 game as another damn 3D Donkey Kong.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, even the difference between Tropical Freeze and now is night and day. And I mean, Tropical Freeze had its own things working against it because of Retro Studios and the expectations that were being placed on Retro Studios. And we've talked about that quite a bit, Josh. I don't need to relitigate that, but Yeah, it is different if Nintendo EPD is doing it because they are huge. They are robust. They are not just one team or two teams or three teams or four teams or five. You know, there's so many permutations of it. And we're not even quite clear if this is exactly 1-to-1 the Odyssey team or if it's members of the Odyssey team pushed into a new Donkey Kong team at EPD.
Yeah, I'm going to be very interested to see the credits for this game.
Yeah. So all that being said, like at the very end of the day, Donkey Kong Bananza, or what I thought was going to be the end of the day, Donkey Kong Bananza represented a happy moment, even if the psychodrama of the last 23 years was still lingering and keeping me from fully appreciating what should have been the biggest day of the fandom in years.
And it's so unfortunate, but like it makes so much sense too that like there's just always going to be this part of us that's like worried that we're going to go back to the buyout, that we're going to have to go through that again.
Yeah. Yeah, I think having a stable home and having a little bit of reliability for the franchise, as much as I liked having the franchise under Retro Studios, it was never a long-term solution. And I think that like having that security is just a baseline. We need that baseline level. We can build from here, but we just need that foundation again. And it's Donkey Kong Bananza. Now, Josh, I don't want to spend too much time on it because Dustin and I already did a 3-hour episode on Donkey Kong's new design a couple of weeks ago. We were really on top of it. Like the new Kongversation season started. It was like, bam, we got to talk about Returns HD. Bam, we got to talk about the new Donkey Kong design. Bam, we got to get this Tetris 99 discussion out of the way and catch up with Sea of Thieves. All right, now
that
Donkey
one got
Kong
me
Bananza.
playing Tetris 99 again, so thank you for that.
Yeah. That's pretty fun, right? I unwind with it when I was finally done with my like 36-hour work day last night. I unwound a little bit with Tetris 99 and I fell right asleep.
I've been playing it semi-regularly since it came out, and I still never came in first. I've come in second a few times, but I need to learn to T-spin. That's the problem.
I need to learn how to T-spin, and I need to learn how to be more proactive with, I can't clear them all right here, but I shouldn't wait for that because the garbage is piling up. Anyway, let's talk about Donkey Kong's new design a little bit because this is still a hot button issue. I've seen it. Whenever I announce anything for Donkey Kong Bananza, I see a couple people in the comments and they're just like, this design makes me sick.
And as a Sonic fan, this will be a hot button issue for many years to come.
Now, Dustin and I already talked about this at length, and it's nice to see it in a full 3D render or an in-game model that's more than just a blurry background visual in the Mario Kart Switch 2 teaser. But this is never going to be my favorite look for Donkey Kong. I will grow, and I've already grown in the past 2 days. I've grown to appreciate it, and I've grown to find it endearing. This will never be my favorite interpretation of the character, at least visually, but that's okay.
It's kind of another one of those things where it's like, the most important thing is that Donkey Kong is back.
Yeah, like, if this is the Faustian bargain we have to make with Shigeru Miyamoto, it's like, Mr. Miyamoto, sir, will you please make sure Donkey Kong games come out on the regular again? And he said, yeah, sure, so long as if I get to tweak him back closer to my preferences and how he looks. It's like, fine, have at it. No, like, it's clear, though, from seeing the animations in the trailer and in the gameplay footage, especially the gameplay footage, there is still a lot of our Donkey Kong in this design. I mean, it is our Donkey Kong. Let's put those ideas to bed that, well, we can put it to bed now. More on that in a bit. This is not young Cranky. This is not some other Donkey Kong. This is the Donkey Kong Country Donkey Kong. He just looks a little bit different. He's put on a little bit of weight. He stopped training for the Olympics because Mario and Sonic games have been canned. So, you know, he's not really hitting the gym on the regular. and he's a little bit older. And so maybe he looks more like his dad did at this time in his dad's life. It's fine. The most important thing is, how are you portraying him? How is he depicted? And from what I've seen, this is the best depiction of Donkey Kong, maybe since Rare. I'll say that much. Visually, I'm still going to find it a bit weird at times. And my favorite Donkey Kong will always be the original 1994 segmented hot dog finger Donkey Kong. I don't care. That's my Donkey Kong. That's my guy. But time stands still for no one. Here we are.
Yeah, I'll say I had this really funny moment where I realized, okay, this is fine. I actually do like this, and it's growing on me, and it's only going to keep growing on me, I think. Where I was like, okay, like you said, this is not, I don't think it's ever going to be my preference. I don't think I'm ever going to like it as much as I liked, the 94 era Kev Bayless design and, the ones that were more closely iterating on that. But I was like, but you know what? I already prefer it as a direct comparison to the previous one. There are things that I actually prefer about it. And I could never say that about the green-eyed version of Sonic. So I was like, I must be okay with this.
Yeah, so, I think that, this Donkey Kong, I've seen a lot of people say, oh, he's capable of so much more now. He can emote so much more. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I do think whenever he has the toothy grin, it looks a lot more natural. It doesn't look like he's got big false teeth just jammed into his face. But he's also capable, he'll flash an expression, and it will look like the Kev Bayless Donkey Kong, or at the very least, the iterations of the Kev Bayless Donkey Kong. March Rose in the chat is saying, I like this more than Tropical Freeze look for Donkey Kong. I'm not saying visually I like him more. I'm saying in the way the character is portrayed emotionally, in the way he is being depicted in his actions in this game. I think it might be my favorite since Rare, since the Donkey Kong Racing trailer.
Yeah, it's for me, there are times where he's looking very, very, very goofy. And unlike the treehouse footage, when he gets close to one of the crystal bananas, his tongue comes out. And that's very cute, but that doesn't strike me. There's a part of me that's but Donkey Kong is supposed to be cooler and more laid back than that. But then when he brings those eyebrows down, and the fact that he can still do that, he can still make that expression.
Yeah.
That's when it's no, this is the same guy. This is,
right.
This is Donkey Kong. I have no problem with this.
He'll flash an expression, he'll do something, and I'm just oh, there he is, okay. Right. And I think that was the biggest fear about redesigning him, was that we would lose a little bit of that. And honestly, I'm fine with the overly cartoony emotes, the tongue wagging, because he did do the Battletoads style eyeball bulging in Donkey Kong Country and Donkey Kong Country 2. So
exactly.
It's I think we have our own conceptions or perceptions of what Donkey Kong is, and we all have a slightly different version of Donkey Kong in our heads. So if we can have something that splits the difference and is able to get them all in there while still being tonally true to not only our idea of what Donkey Kong is, but the creator's idea of what Donkey Kong is, what Miyamoto's idea of Donkey Kong is. Because the biggest thing I was worried about Nintendo EPD taking over Donkey Kong is Donkey Kong going to be portrayed like a mindless jackass?
Right.
And he is definitely not a mindless jackass in this. And it was the Nintendo Treehouse presentation, day one, when they were going through the introductory mine area. And I'm going to save this discussion for a little bit later on because it's a part I want to talk about in depth. But there was a moment in there where it just clicked for me, and I'm like, oh my God, this is my Donkey Kong.
Right. Yeah, this does not feel like a radically different character. For the most part. Like I said, there are little bits and pieces here where there is a part of me that's like, I don't know about that. But then just as quickly he'll do something or make a face or like where I'm just like, okay, no, it's fine.
Yeah. And I think that honestly, I will grow used to this. It will become normal. In like this year, it will become normal. I will be used to this by the end of summer. Okay.
Exactly.
So,
because we're gonna play the fuck out of this.
Yeah, and so I mean, if I can get it, that's right, my biggest concern. But my thing is that yes, I can enjoy and appreciate this for what it is, but I don't have to pit it against the old design. I can still say I love that old design better because that's the design that Donkey Kong was when I became a fan. And that will be what I'm always nostalgic for. That will be what brings the warm feelings into my body. And I can always revisit that design whenever I want because I have the games. The games aren't getting amended. They're not going back and George Lucasing out the way he looked in those games. They're not going to take away the renders on the DKVine gallery. They're not going to, like all of it is still going to be there. And
if we, the fandom, complain enough and loud enough and bitch about it enough for about, 10 or 11 years, Nintendo might eventually bring back the rare design and do a crossover. And then it'll be really unclear if that's like past Donkey Kong or alternate universe Donkey Kong. And they'll be really inconsistent about it. But the important thing is we'll have them both.
Josh, you speak like you're speaking from experience, but I have no idea what you could be talking about.
Yeah, it's unclear. I'm just giving you a hypothetical example of something that could happen.
Look, I like in the chat right now, Steak Fighter. I see ya. I get it. Like this design is not going to be everybody's cup of tea, especially if you really love the old design. And I do love the old design, but I'm also. I guess I understand Miyamoto's wants here. Donkey Kong is his baby. And I feel like maybe he thinks he made some concessions back in 1994. And it's not like he holds that against that design or Donkey Kong Country. He obviously is not hating on Donkey Kong Country. And I think that's the other important thing that people need to realize is Miyamoto does not hate Rare. Miyamoto does not hate Donkey Kong Country. That is an urban legend. That quote is false. Miyamoto's come out and said, I never remember saying that, but if I did, that's wrong.
Right.
So you see a lot of love for Donkey Kong and Rare era Donkey Kong in this game. Even if the redesign happened, even if he looks the way he did. Also, we're all treating this design like it's brand new. We were introduced to this design in the Super Mario Brothers movie. I realize it's a little bit different. Like all the characters look a little bit different, but effectively it is that design. This is the same design. And you look at the Super Mario Brothers movie and a depiction of Donkey Kong's world, a little bit different, but it's still got so much of Rare in it. Swanky Kong was in the Super Mario Brothers movie.
I love the way DK was depicted in the Mario movie. For the record, I thought like that design in that context absolutely worked, and I think the strengths that I saw in it there are also absolutely applying here. I do think that another reason that maybe when he's a little bit too cutesy, it rubs me a little strangely, is because like I guess I feel like that side of it should be on other characters. Like Diddy being cute or mischievous or something like that. That would feel right for him. But the fact that Diddy is not there, or at least we haven't seen him yet, does make that a little easier to swallow.
And I'm fine with Donkey Kong being multifaceted because I've always thought of him as a contemporary man of the 90s. Mm-hmm. You know?
Contemporary man of 30 years ago.
Yeah, the 90s were just like a couple years back. What are you talking about? And,
sure they were.
Like, I've always thought of him as the sensitive 90s man. And he's got a temper. He has failings, moral failings every now and then. Donkey Kong Land 3, anyone? And, you know, he can be a bit of a brute at times, a bit of an unfeeling clod, but like any good 90s sitcom dad, he'll learn his lesson by the end of it, and he'll become slightly better from it. And yeah, like I never really liked Donkey Kong's depiction in Jungle Beat, even if you massage in the story after the fact, it's still like, what, this is just belligerence for belligerence' sake. Like, what the hell is happening? And I honestly had problems with the way Donkey Kong was depicted in Donkey Kong 64, where he was portrayed like an idiot, Donkey all confused. So
yeah, I never got that either.
Yeah, like, I feel like the DK64 team didn't really understand Donkey Kong. So it's not like this is a new situation. We've been talking about, is Donkey Kong being depicted right since DKVine launched in 1999.
Well, Hyle, fortunately, 1999 was actually only a couple of years ago.
I know.
So it's really not been that long.
Yeah, we really should warn somebody about 9/11 before it happens.
It's certainly nothing to joke about, Hyle. No,
it's not. But I'll feel bad that I just spent all my time talking about Donkey Kong on the internet, and I didn't actually, step up when I could have made a difference. In-game, Josh, Donkey Kong's fur looks a little bit different than in the renders. It's got almost a feathered look to it. It's not quite the furry shenanigans we have grown accustomed to from Rare or Tropical Freeze era DKC even. This Donkey Kong, he actually almost doesn't look that far off from how he looked in Skylanders. It's not quite as plasticky looking.
That's a good comparison, yeah. And one that it's likely only you would be able to make, but you're right.
No, this is the comparison only I would be able to make. He also kind of looks like Conker in Project Spark.
There you go, yeah. Oh, that's a really good comparison, yeah.
And here's the thing about that, Josh. I think Conker in Project Spark is my favorite Conker design, and I actually really like the way Donkey Kong looks in Skylanders. Aside from maybe his brow does look a little bit too Neanderthal-esque in Skylanders, but aside from that, I really like the way he looked in that game and was depicted, and so I'm kind of fine with the feather look. I think it looks kind of neat. Nifty.
Well, Donkey Kong is going to be in an ostrich village in this game, so, at least he's fitting in.
Yeah, maybe he somehow knew ahead of time and he just blew it out. He got the blow dryer out. But here's the thing. Jungle Beat. I have come around on Jungle Beat. I have. I actually appreciate Jungle Beat, and I think it's quite a fun game. And I would like some of the things introduced in Jungle Beat to come back and be added to the tapestry. But Jungle Beat, his fur in that game, it's like they were trying to go for this version of the Rare look. But instead, I've always equated it, I'm sorry if this is crass, it looks like blow-dried pubic hair in Jungle Beat. And Mario Kart DS in the renders of that as a result. I don't like furry shenanigans when they're that out of control. So if this gets around that, fine. I think it looks great.
Just pulling up an actual screenshot of Jungle Beat.
Oh, I thought you were pulling up a picture of blow-dried pubic hair.
No, I wouldn't do that on the air. Yeah, okay, I see what you mean. Jesus.
Yeah.
I'd never really noticed that about Jungle Beat before, but yeah, okay.
So I like a little bit
of plastic. Now I'll never be able to play Jungle Beat without looking at that.
Yeah. Well, so, and in the renders, the rendered fur looks fine. It looks an appropriate length, and, considering how technically impressive this game is, I'm not gonna dog it for not having the perfect 2D Donkey Kong furry shenanigan look.
Yeah, it's clear that this game is doing a lot, technically. So it does make sense to go for something a little more stylized, and it's still furry shenanigans. It's just much more stylized, Yeah, it's just much more style. He's got the rim lighting. I'm looking at the episode art right now. He's got like rim lighting around him.
Yeah.
But I think it works. I think it looks good. He especially fits very well within the worlds of the game. He fits perfectly within the aesthetic.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. It's funny because in the area of the game that they're showing off on the treehouse, day 2, but also the second part of day 1, it's lagoon level or whatever, but it did look visually reminiscent of Project Spark. You even had the ocean pouring down because it takes place beneath the ocean floor. And
oh, that was so cool. Like when they panned the camera up to show that.
When the ocean pours down, it looks like a beam, and there's a beam in the background of Project Spark's worlds. And so I was just like, yeah, just like Project Spark, Conker's Big Reunion, episode 1.
Square Mango says at one point they call the level Ape Cape.
There's different areas of it. I think it's like,
I see.
I think it's like how it's the Metro Kingdom, but New Donk City is within.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. So I think each subterranean level will have kind of a blunt naming, like this is the lagoon level or layer. Lagoon layer, I think it is. And then from there, you have different sections of it. I'm not quite sure yet because it's early days and we're just trying to keep up with everything. But yeah. Anyway, Cranky makes everything better, Josh. At the end of the day, having Cranky Kong announced. Now, Malik and I did not get to talk about this because this happened after our live stream episode. And so before I uploaded it to all the various podcast networks, I had to do a quick introduction. Hey, we recorded this live before Cranky Kong was revealed. So just keep that in mind. But the late day reveal of Cranky Kong on April 2nd, it's kind of curious the way this happened because what shook out was Nintendo amended the initial reveal trailer, the same reveal trailer they showed during the Nintendo Direct. They edited it or they uploaded a different version of it to their Nintendo Today app. And the frustrating thing about the Nintendo Today app, Josh, is that it updates based on your time zone. So if you are, for example, in Japan or Oceania, Australia, New Zealand, if you are, further east than the rest of the world and the day rolls over for you first, if April 2nd becomes April 3rd, the Nintendo Today app will then upload or update for you, and it won't for everybody else to the west. So I could not get this confirmed because my Nintendo Today app was still showing Nintendo Direct today. Watch the Nintendo Direct. And yet people in Japan were starting to say, hey, I saw Cranky in the Donkey Kong Bananza trailer. Here's a very, very blurry screen grab off my phone.
Right.
And so
do they not know how to take screenshots on their phone?
No, people don't know how to do print screen on Nintendo Directs, and they don't know how to remove the little icon of Mario. I'm like, you got to turn that off so you can get clean screenshots. Oh, yeah, it drives me crazy. Or they just like pause it. They still have like the scroll bar on the bottom, and I'm like, no, you've just got to time your finger. Anyway.
Wasn't it Freezer who actually confirmed it for us?
I asked Freezer. Freezer was in the inner circle at the moment. I was like, Freezer, can you do me a favor? Can you confirm this? And she was able to eventually find it because I got to say the Nintendo Today app is not very intuitive finding anything on that. It's kind of clunky and ugly, but she found it. She confirmed it. I was able to run the story. And look, when I first saw this blurry screenshot, I immediately said, Cranky, 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 Cranky,
right.
Cranky. I had a little giddy moment of relief because it was one thing. Of course, we saw the naughty fossil in the trailer. That was the other thing we were holding on to from the trailer was, well, there was a naughty fossil. So it's clear that the past isn't verboten. It's not forsaken. They can reference things in a way that even Retro felt like they couldn't. So,
and given the 2D section of the trailer we did see, like, I get it. I know how, like, focused on characters and continuity and, like, you know, world building and consistency, like, so much of the DK fandom is. But given, you know, we got the ACM rendered trees, you know, it's like, I'm like I said, I too felt that. I was the one who had the whole thing of, like, so I'm sort of calling myself out here too. But it's a little weird given that we did have that so much apprehension about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's
like,
only
of course
natural.
the old
like,
stuff can come back. Here it is.
It would be one thing, Josh, if we had gotten so many Donkey Kong games over the last decade or 2 decades. It would be one thing if we never had mistranslated interviews run by IGN with the Jungle Beat creators where we thought they just hated Donkey Kong Country and this was being done out of spite. And the 90s were just a few years ago at that point, and we thought the characters weren't fresh enough for today's gamers. And then there
was a lot of stuff like that. Was sort of the prevailing sentiment in the industry in the 6th generation, to be fair.
I don't know how you remember the generations, but sure. It's the GameCube generation. It's the buyout era, Josh.
Right.
Read the room. Know your audience. But there was also just like the Miyamoto quote that was bandied around. There was a lot of false assumptions about the Rare buyout happening around the time. And there was that editorial almost mandate that we have to slag Rare. We have to slag their games. The only good game they ever made was GoldenEye. Maybe we'll allow Perfect Dark. But everybody left to go form Free Radical. Everybody who made anything good at Rare is gone. Donkey Kong Country was always overrated trash. And so not only were we always on the defensive as a fandom, like, why do you like the stuff you like? But it felt like we were on the defensive from the creators, even if that wasn't really the case. That was the narrative being formed by the game media at the time. So, yeah, like, we're all going to feel that way for a little bit longer, I'm sure. And it might be a little bit longer before we can ever feel safe and secure enough in our fandom where Donkey Kong trailer can premiere and we see all this new stuff and we're not apprehensive about it and we're just excited about it.
Yeah, I think that code goes back to what we were talking about earlier with how, like, we saw the Donkey Kong Racing trailer. We saw everything that we had loved and had grown up with or were still in the process of growing up with rendered in glorious 3D, and then we just never got it.
Yeah. So, Cranky, though. This was just such a huge relief. I know amongst the DKVine staff, this is where Cameron and maybe even Dustin started, like, feeling a little bit warmer about the game. They're like, oh, okay, we don't have to worry about this so much. It's already more than we got with Jungle Beat. Let's see how this plays out. And that allowed the day to end on a somewhat happy note, you know?
Exactly. That's exactly how I felt too. You know, my whole thing was like, I would have felt better if we'd seen Diddy, but seeing Cranky was like, okay, well, that's pretty much, that strikes the same note. That's fine. That works.
And in the trailer, in the re-edited trailer, you see Donkey Kong kind of high-fiving Cranky and it being too much for Cranky. And it's the bit in the actual direct trailer where Donkey was slapping the ostrich at some point that some people are saying it's espresso. I think that's too soon to say, oh, an ostrich, that must be espresso. It seems to be an ostrich kingdom, so let's not.
Yeah, there are other ostriches in the background of that scene. I don't think it is espresso, but it's possible that espresso could show up in that location.
Yeah. Let's not get too carried away. I understand the desire and the appeal to want to, like, make all these connections, but safety first, everyone. But
safety first.
Like, for some reason, they had the second version of the trailer. And I don't know if they had this ready to go. I don't know if they held back this edited trailer with Cranky in it to make the Nintendo Today app a bit more, you know, lucrative. Like, give it people a bigger incentive to install it on their phones because, hey...
I think that's probably the idea, because this has happened, like, they announced the release date of the Zelda movie when the app came out. The app is, the app is brand new, and I think they're trying to give people reasons to get it.
But it's such a weird thing, too, because you think they would just show the clip of Cranky, being like, Cranky's in it, rather than have a secondary upload of the trailer that has been edited. And so part of me wondered if it was a reaction to the negativity from the freaks, as you called them. And I don't know if Nintendo would have possibly even been cognizant of that, because the only message they probably got from the masses that day was lower the price.
Yeah, true.
So I think that, like, maybe that's me just thinking our bubble is bigger than it is, but it does make me wonder if somebody somewhere at Nintendo was like, oh, we should probably throw them a bone because they're taking the wrong idea from this. I don't know.
Right.
But it did lift the mood. It kind of reminded me, it's a much lesser version of when David Wise was announced as composer the afternoon that Tropical Freeze was revealed, like in the hours after we found out David Wise is back. David Wise is doing new music for Tropical Freeze, because everybody was still kind of on the fence and arguing, like they still didn't bring back the Kremlings. What the hell? And, Dixie was in there and that was cool, but it was just like, why? And then David Wise is back and was like, well, that's better than the Kremlings. We'll take it. Bye. We're happy. But one element I loved of Cranky getting revealed, and this might be superficial and spiteful on my part again, but so be it. It blunted all of the, is this a prequel? Is this an origin story? Is this DK Senior? Blunted all of that, obliterated it, and
right.
It firmly rooted the game in the here and now. It is a successor to the Donkey Kong Country games, to Donkey Kong 64, to Jungle Beat, to King of Swing. It's part of the lineage. It's not some sort of thing that we have to debate for years on end. Well, it's probably young Cranky in that game, because look at the way he looks.
Yeah, I saw speculation from that, about that. I believe even in my community that, maybe this is DK Jr. And of course, my reaction was like, well, yeah, it's usually DK Jr. What are you talking about? But
Well, save that for another day. That's a whole other argument, Josh.
We cannot get into that.
Yeah, so just seeing Cranky, even though we didn't have any context for him, he was holding a shovel. And so I got to make the easy, low-hanging joke. Oh, he's burying his wife finally. Ha 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 ha. Wrinkly's dead.
That's good. That's good. You're being self-deprecating, but that is funny.
So we would come to find out then, about 12 to 14 hours later, the next morning, exactly, not necessarily the context of Cranky, because we still don't really know what he does in the game aside from exist as an NPC with dialogue, but we do know what he's doing in this underground world that Donkey Kong Bananza is set in. And
I just want to say his dialogue is so good.
I agree. I said on Blue Sky, this is the best dialogue Cranky has had since 1999.
100%. I missed that post, but I completely agree, and that's exactly what I was about to say. Cause, in the retro era, it was nice having him around, but he was so, he was a little bit neutered. He did not... He didn't seem as self-aware. He didn't make his meta jokes about video game history. And he didn't seem, for the most part, nearly cranky enough.
Yeah, there should be something that's casually cruel and undercutting about Cranky's dialogue, where he does care. He does love Donkey and by extension Diddy and Dixie. But at the same time, he doesn't want to show it.
Right.
And I think too often he kind of lost the crankiness along the way. And it was more, he was the wise old man, the wise elder. He was,
right.
maybe cranky only on a surface level, but the jokes were more about him being old than about him being a dick. So to see actual Cranky Kong dialogue that is just tonally right. This also just immediately put me at ease about the tone. Before I saw the Treehouse presentations, before I saw how Donkey Kong was going to be depicted, I was like, this feels like Rare's Donkey Kong in the writing. And sure, this might be translated. This might be localization that we're witnessing, but fuck it, I'll take it.
I mean, it probably is localization, but even so, props to the localization team. Like, you got it. This feels right.
Yeah, like there's some fans who think unless it's like verbatim from the original Japanese, it's somehow inauthentic. And I'm like, well, this is what Nintendo wants people in the West to see, or English speakers to see.
Oh, you want to talk about discussions we do not have time to get into? Translation versus localization is a good one.
Yeah. It's something we haven't really had to deal with much in the DKU. So
I learned the word anime in 1997, and people have never stopped arguing about it.
Yeah, I'm not accustomed to it, so it is it is going to be new. But for the meantime, I am enjoying what we are seeing of Cranky. So in this dialogue, this was kind of over the shoulder gameplay footage at a Switch 2 event, and we heard. Well, we heard him. He sounds like Cranky still. He still makes the same noises, but he says specifically that he is in the underground world that the bulk of this game takes place in because, and I quote, "I heard there was a banana bandit on the loose. I knew who to blame. Just had to suss out where he ran to hide." So, Cranky was chasing a banana bandit, and more on that in a bit. But he says, "But my job wasn't done there. No, sir. See, the so-called leader of the bunch was away for a frolic in the mines. You get what I'm saying? I had to leave our comfy island and be the hero. Just because you weren't around. Phooey. It should have been
perfect, man.
It should have been you riding Rambi, and next to Rambi's name, there is a little icon of Rambi. And by the way, the icon of Rambi is the rare design, or at least the redesign back to the rare design that we've seen from the theme park. So, it should have been you riding Rambi all the way down here to avenge those stolen bananas, not me. In my day, rivals had charisma, even in overalls. Heh, that's a little bit of a later dialogue option, but so there's a lot to unpack there. And of course, he was chasing someone down there, a banana bandit that uses he, him pronouns in the singular, chasing him down there. I have more to say about this later, so let's not get into that. But Rambi is effectively confirmed for Bananza. We don't see Rambi in any of this footage. Cranky was riding Rambi. I assume Rambi will be rideable at some point.
It's a very, very safe assumption. This is sort of a hallmark of the Galaxy Odyssey. I don't think Sunshine was doing this yet, but I think they've done it at least since Galaxy, where like Yoshi will be talked about that way. Or like anytime some object or character in the game, like say Luigi is mentioned, you get like a little picture of Luigi's head next to the word Luigi.
Yeah.
So there's absolutely no chance, I would say, that Rambi is just going to be referenced in dialogue and it will not actually show up at some point.
Agreed. I mean, at the very least, his icon is in there, so hold on to that, people. Come on. And just, it's very comforting to have Cranky referenced Donkey Kong Islands, because there was the fear that maybe the Jungle Kingdom was going to be like the retcon setting of the Donkey Kong games going forward, or an attempt to marry it more with Mario. Like, they would just forget about Donkey Kong Island. And so Donkey Kong Island, still canon. The DK rap is derisively quoted from Cranky to put down Donkey Kong, which I love. And I also love that it's indirect.
So perfect, yeah.
It's an indirect reference to Diddy Kong and Tiny Kong and Chunky Kong and Lanky Kong. But like, more than that, it's just, it's an in-universe thing, the DK rap. And so I always love when it's actually referenced and brought up as a thing. And of course, Cranky would be giving, even if he was in the music video, would give Donkey Kong shit about it. So I love it. That's perfect. That's spot on. But the thing that really put me over the punched moon, Josh, is the fact that Cranky makes a specific reference to his day. In my day, rivals had charisma, even in overalls. Talking about how his rival was Mario. This is an explicit reference to Cranky Kong being DK Senior. And like, I made a mention of this in my news article. I posted about it on Blue Sky, and some people were confused. They were like, because I was like, yeah, it's confirmed in canon. Cranky is the original Donkey Kong. And people were like, I thought that was already canon. That was never not canon. What are you talking about, DKVine? And I'm just like, yo, I know. What I'm saying is, so many people out there have tried to say that since the buyout, Nintendo no longer adheres to this. Nintendo no longer agrees with Rare. And in their interpretation, the modern Donkey Kong is the Donkey Kong who fought Mario. And Cranky is just some guy.
Is there any particular, like, example of that? Or is it just because it hasn't been referenced? Because the only thing I can think of that would ever point to that might be the Duck Hunt trailer for Smash 4. Which shows, you know, they come on screen at the start of that trailer, and like, they're all 8-bit sprites, and it's Donkey Kong is the 8-bit sprite from the arcade, or maybe the NES version, when they usually use that one, of Donkey Kong. And then when they all, you know, become their Smash models, it is, of course, you know, the modern rare Donkey Kong. But other than that, I can't think of any reason that you could point to that would indicate that.
It's never been, like, and a thing in the games. It hasn't really been a reference. And occasionally, and Smash has it both ways. Smash will use Donkey Kong as a stand-in for the arcade Donkey Kong, or they will actually get cheeky with it and allude to the fact that actually Cranky is the original Donkey Kong. But that's just the way Nintendo's operated for the most part, is whenever Donkey Kong needs to serve the purpose, he can stand in for the arcade Donkey Kong. But more often than not, they're just not going to bring it up. So I can understand why people... Now, there are some people who vehemently hated the idea of Cranky being the original Donkey Kong, and they think there should just be one Donkey Kong, and we don't like change, and he has a son named Donkey Kong Jr., it's all the same guy. And they just don't like Rare's continuity and canon. And usually I find this to be more hardcore Mario fans who feel like it raises too many questions with Mario, more so than being appreciative of Donkey Kong's own history and canon. But it's over. It's done. Cranky is still DK Senior. Get over it.
Well, at least until the next time they go more than a few years without saying it, and then people will definitely start being like, but I thought there was just one Donkey Kong.
Of course. But it was a very happy victory lap to take yesterday. Yesterday from when we're recording this.
And I loved that dialogue line for all the reasons that you outlined, but also because, like I said earlier, I love that meta shit. Like, one of my favorite stories in video games is the Donkey Kong Land story, because it's just such a piss take. It doesn't make any sense unless you assume that all of the characters are aware that they are video game characters. And that was always something that I personally loved so much about, like, rare side of the rare shared universe. Is that, like, they were just, it wasn't a piss take though, because it was taken like fairly seriously, but it wasn't like they were just totally joking about it, but they were self-aware of it.
Exactly.
And I love that, and that's another thing that I think was missing from Cranky's depictions, at least since DK64.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because he is the most meta-aware of all of the meta-aware characters.
Yeah, he's almost like the Deadpool or whatever, where he somehow has elevated his consciousness to be beyond what other characters can perceive. So yeah, good times, and just to see that dialogue, it was another reassuring thing. It's like, okay, they got that right. This is already way better than Jungle Beats rollout. This is night and day. Is this everything I would have wanted in my fantasy ideal 3D Donkey Kong game? Of course not. But oh my god, in Cranky's dialogue alone, it's so loaded with loving fan tributes. And
I know, and then when they did the Treehouse stream the next day, they were like, we don't have time. Like, they didn't talk to Cranky very much, and I was like, no, I just want to sit there and like go through every single one of Cranky's dialogue options.
They didn't know how many freaks were watching, so I won't hold it against them. But
no, I'm not holding it against them. I get it. You want to show off the game, but and also I think that those Treehouse streams also do a fairly good job of leaving you wanting more. You know.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't mad at them for not doing it, but I was like, God, I can't wait to just talk to Cranky.
That's the thing. It's not a walkthrough. We're not just having the game spoiled for us. They want us hungry for experiencing it ourselves. So I get it. But not to go too much on a tangent here, Josh, but I have to have something clarified for me, and I think you're the right person for it.
I hope so.
So when I had all these various screen grabs from this video on Blue Sky, and I was like, wow, look at this. Like, look at all the things Cranky references. It was my attempt to soothe the Donkey Kong fandom in my self-appointed role as the emotional caretaker, where, it's like, look, it's way more than we thought when the trailer premiered yesterday. The faith is being rewarded. This game could go deep into Donkey Kong's mythology. And a couple people then picked it up. A couple people in the Sonic fandom. Is it re-skeeted? Is that what we've gone with? Or is it like
That's what we've decided to call it, yeah.
Okay.
Blue Sky doesn't want us to call it that, but that's what that just makes people call it that even more.
Okay. Well, a couple people in the Sonic fandom re-skeeted it, or quote-skeeted it, and they said, wow, this would be so controversial in Sonic fandom, all these references. And I was just like, what? I didn't get it.
No, unfortunately, I can't explain that to you if you want me to.
Oh, okay. Okay, something about Sonic games are too self-referential these days?
Well, these days, Sonic games have been incredibly self-referential for at least the last 15 years and probably longer. Okay. But what they're specifically calling out is that, like, I'm gonna try to say this without, like, a bunch of, like, fandom jargon, so bear with me if it seems like I'm simplifying things too much.
Okay.
A couple of years ago, a writer was hired who started out as a fan. And, this is the same thing that we were talking about earlier of, like, the people making Bananza grew up as Super Donkey Kong fans. It's been long enough now that can happen, and it's not unusual. The guy who's written the vast majority of official Sonic content the past few years, started out as a fan and has been around for a very, very long time. I remember reading his posts on Usenet, I'm pretty sure. He was called Ian the Potto back then. But in any case, because he's been in so deep for so long, he tends to write lots of dialogue that references past events. And some people feel like that can get to be a little much and a little obnoxious and a little overt sometimes, when it seems like every single thing has to be like, oh, wow, this is just like this thing that happened in this game that we played 25 years ago. And it's not depicted that way, and they're not making meta-aware jokes like like that would imply, like Cranky does. It's more like just, it would be kind of like if, say, there's a big laser and a character in Bananza goes like, oh, this is just like the Blastomatic from the time that K. Rool did, and they just went like on and on and on about it. Except it happens like a lot.
It's less about actually making references and more about the execution of said references.
I would say so. I would say that's where the disagreement lies.
It almost sounds.
I try to stay away from the Sonic fandom these days, so I don't even quite know if I'm how well I'm depicting that. I just know it's something that that some people take more issue with, and then of course on the other side you've got people who absolutely love it and think that there's nothing wrong with Sonic constantly referencing its history. And I honestly don't feel like I really have much of a dog in that fight one way or the other at this point. So that's what they're referencing.
To me, it sounds kind of like Family Guy syndrome. Oh, you think that's bad? And then you just have...
That is, the people who are bothered by it, that is how they feel about it, yeah.
Okay. So I thought it was really elegant, Cranky's dialogue here. And I think it's just the right way to root it in Donkey Kong's world and keep it true to Cranky, too. Like, everything he said is not, like... It's perfectly in character for him to, like, really just dig in about the DK rap. Like, that would be something Cranky would bring up to humiliate Donkey Kong.
Absolutely, and I didn't think of like the Sonic controversy at all when I saw that, because, like you said, yeah, to me that's just like that's like a core component of who Cranky Kong is that he does things like that. Yeah.
Well, love Cranky, love to see his role in the game. Happy he's there. At the very least, that's one more character than we got in Jungle Beat. So things are already looking up. Nintendo Treehouse Live, they then show off the introductory area in Donkey Kong Bananza. And the plot of this game is kind of, it's layered just as the game is itself in its worlds, but the plot of the game is that there is a rare earth mineral called Banandium, Josh, which is sort of the DKU version of Marvel's Vibranium or Adamantium. Just this, or Avatar's Unobtainium. Just this made up nonsense element or mineral that has highly unique and even reactive properties. And it can enhance something, it can explode on impact, but implausibly it's also edible and rich in potassium. You can eat this rock just like you can an actual banana. And it's called Banandium. And this is the kind of daft, silly dumbness that is so much like Rare and feels right at home in a Donkey Kong game. I love Banandium.
Yeah, I love the way it looks, and I especially love its gameplay function. Like, it just... I said toward the beginning of the episode how clear it is how much this time this game has spent being in development. Mm-hmm. Because the concept... Like, it has such a specific concept, much like Breath of the Wild and then Tears of the Kingdom did, where the amount of, like, playtesting and just iteration that it would take to get something like this to feel right and work the way that it does, it kind of boggles the mind a little bit.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I'm specifically talking about how you can pick up pretty much any chunk of the level, and you can like break through it, you can throw it, you can swing it around, and different elements react in different ways. And like you said, Banandium specifically explodes on contact with other objects. Yeah.
It's such a bewildering thing to witness. And again, why wasn't this game at E3 2021? Well, look at it. So, Banandium, it is the primary MacGuffin of the game. It comes in different configurations. You got Banandium chips, which are like banana chips, but it's Banandium. But the big one is the entire Banandium gems, which are the big collectible in the game. And Banandium is also what the radiation symbol on the HUD stands for. It's showing like the Banandium you're collecting. But it also, I think, ties in with the name a little bit, Donkey Kong Bananza, which, of course, is a very clever pun. But, Bananza brings to mind, like, the word Bonanza brings to mind, I don't know, the Western Bonanza, and it brings to mind the gold rush out west. And I don't know, I think
my parents love that show.
Yeah, my dad had surgery the other week, and when he was laying in his hospital bed, they're like, "What, you want us to turn on the TV?" And he was like, "Put on the Western Channel." And I was like,
our dads would probably get along very well.
I was like, was I adopted? I don't. Okay. Anyway, I love it though. I think it's great, and I think that Banandium is just the next great dumb addition to the banana legendarium in the DKU. And also, whenever you collect...
I like that it follows up on what the retro games were doing about how, bananas do have, like, at least on Donkey Kong Island, the bananas do have magical properties. And there's a reason beyond just being a dick that K. Rool so wanted them.
Right. And then you collect a Banandium gem, which are the big, like, golden bananas in the game, effectively, or power stars or jiggies, what have you. And in text, when we collect it, it says, "Oh, banana."
Right.
Which, fuck yeah. Again, they're really layering in some DK64 love with this game.
Well, it also says "Oh, banana" on the soundtrack when it happens.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So there you go. So the website for the game on Nintendo.com listed the Banandium gems as golden bananas, which, of course, they're not golden bananas, Josh. I don't need to explain this to you, but I will.
No.
First seen in a rare promotional render for Donkey Kong Country, first introduced in the games in Mario Party, first fleshed out in Donkey Kong 64 as the primary collectible, and then later had its backstory compounded with the prime golden banana that warps you to Tiki Tong's home dimension in Donkey Kong Country Returns. So they're not golden.
I totally remembered all of that. You didn't need to tell me.
They're not golden bananas. Now, the file name actually lists them as crystal bananas, which we all know is the all-powerful MacGuffin from DK Jungle Climber. It's K. Rool's last big scheme was trying to get the crystal bananas. But I don't think they're really the crystal bananas either. They're called Banandium gems in the game. I think it was just the website people really didn't have much information when they were setting everything up. They had assets, but they didn't really know what to refer to some things. And
I believe I called them crystal bananas earlier in the episode too, and I just want to apologize to you and to all of our listeners.
No, it's fine, because listen, Josh, listen. It's possible that Banandium is what the crystal bananas from Jungle Climber are in fact made of, which is why everybody wants to collect these vast amounts of Banandium, why there's this gold rush on Ingot Isle. These mining companies are moving in. Donkey Kong is moving in. Donkey Kong sees a Banandium gem and his tongue sticks out. And I think Donkey Kong, while he probably went to Ingot Isle to claim some of the Banandium for himself, to build a Banandium horde, ostensibly to benefit Donkey Kong Island, but probably for his own selfish reasons. He's not perfect. But I think in the heat of the moment, he probably just wants to eat this shit. But speaking of the gold rush, what's interesting, the monkey miners that we see throughout the mine, which, by the way, all of the monkey miners in the mine have dialogue. You can talk to all of them. They all have things to say. And I love that. I love how alive this world feels.
Absolutely. Yeah. I really like just watching watching the Treehouse presentation of day one anyway, I haven't seen what they showed off today yet, but that is what really sold me on the game, I'll just go ahead and say.
Yeah. So you get exploring the mine a little bit, and you see that there's various crates throughout the mines, and the crates are stamped with NDC.
Mm-hmm.
New Donk City, Josh. And seems to me that Mayor Pauline wants some of the Banandium for herself. For maybe the city of New Donk, maybe to power it. I don't know. But what's also interesting is when Donkey Kong is exploring a little bit topside, when he can get topside before, Ingot Island is just pushed into the crust of the earth, you can make out in the distance what seems to be a city skyline.
Yeah, no, you saw. I'm glad I wasn't the only one who noticed that, because yeah.
Now, whether or not this game will firmly root itself as at least having Ingot Isle like just within walking or driving distance of New Donk City, close to the Metro Kingdom, and whether or not it deliberately roots Donkey Kong in Mario's world, which has always been somewhat of concern given the history of what Rare was doing with the DKU. It's like, oh no, what if this contradicts it in any way? Well, fuck it, we'll fan wank it away, I don't care. I'm not that concerned by it, because here's the thing. I always knew Nintendo EPD would probably hint or outright say that Donkey Kong and Mario do share a physical world, as they do in the Super Mario Brothers movie, rather than being cross-dimensional travelers or anything, or any of the notions from the 1990s. Although the Super Mario Brothers movie did introduce cross-dimensional travel again, it just had Donkey Kong on the other side, rather than having the events with Donkey Kong 81 exist before Donkey Kong made the jump. I digress.
Mm-hmm.
But it would also just mean that even if they confirm that, even if that's the case, it still doesn't change the notion of the Rare archipelago. Donkey Kong Island is a thing. Ergo Crocodile Isle is a thing. Ergo the Northern Hemisphere. Ergo the Tropical Freeze Islands. Ergo the Jungle Climber Islands. And yes, Timbers Island. Yes, from there, the Isle of Hags. From Willow Woods in the Panther Kingdom. I mean, at the end of the day, this doesn't damage the DKU if it does confirm that. It would just alter our perception of it a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think it would change anything one way or the other either. But also, we don't know where this mining operation is actually taking place relative to Donkey Kong Island, because, I thought, well, maybe my first thought too was, okay, that's probably New Donk City, and I think that is the most likely outcome. But then I also thought, maybe it's Big Ape City.
Yeah, maybe it is. Yeah, Mayor Pauline can send monkeys into these mines, and New Donk City doesn't have to be within eyeshot. Like, it could be anything. We don't know. I mean, yes, the likely explanation is that it's New Donk City. We're not deluded here. But again... There's a lot to juggle with Donkey Kong continuity, especially that there is a Big Ape City, and that's hard to reconcile with New Donk City, although it's not impossible. Right. It's just, you know what? We'll wait and see. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it.
Nah.
So, in addition to this gold rush, we have Donkey Kong Island and New Donk City trying to get the Banandium. We also have the presence of what appear to be the primary antagonist of the game, Voidco. Now, Voidco, they're a mysterious outlet. They're a mysterious conglomerate. I mean, a corporation. It's in the name.
Right.
And from what we've seen, they're headed by 3 distinct primates. There is the main one whose little face appears on the Voidco symbols, on the logo, on the iconography. He looks like a little impish moglin, like squirrel monkey. I don't know how to describe him. And he sits on like this banana throne. And then you've got the big burly miner who seems to be some sort of baboon. I mean, he looks more like a gorilla, but it seems to me that he's got the facial markings of a baboon. And then there is the femme fatale spider monkey.
Right. Yeah, this is one of those things where when I was first watching the trailer, I could not process everything that was like hitting my eyeballs. So I know you were on the last episode, you were saying like people were going like, why couldn't that be Candy? And it's because, of course, she is a villain. That wouldn't make any sense. But I too had a moment while watching the trailer for the first time. It was like, is that Candy? And then, of course, I went back and watched it. I was like, that wouldn't make any sense. That's definitely in no way supposed to be Candy.
Donkey Kong gets a massive redesign, so Candy also gets redesigned to have white hair with purple streaks. I do like
it's sort of what happened to Barry.
A little bit, yeah. Yeah, look how that turned out for her, though.
Right?
I do like how these characters look. I like them. They're fun characters. I don't know enough about them yet, but just visually, they pop in a way that also doesn't feel untrue of what a Donkey Kong character is supposed to look like. So I appreciate that. Like the biggest swing is the little guy, who looks like a little monster, but I like that he's not even cute. I like that he just looks gross, you know?
Now, I mean, what this very much brings to mind as somebody who extensively played Odyssey is I think they're called the Brutals.
Okay. Yeah.
It's this group of 3, rabbit baddies that work with Bowser, and they like continually challenge you to different like mini boss fights throughout the game.
Yeah, I've heard that brought up quite a bit when making the argument for another character who is so far unseen, a banana bandit of certain renown that we will get to in a little bit.
But don't worry, we're gonna talk about Wart. Right after we talk about Sneak King. When are we doing that, by the way? I put substantial time into that game this week.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Josh. I'm so sorry, Josh. I can't do the Sneak King spotlight until next year for its 20th anniversary.
That's right. Okay, well, I have some unique experiences with that game, so I'll look forward to that.
All right. So I do like the designs, honestly, way more than I like Lord Frederick. Like, I like the snowmats, but Lord Frederick is pretty flaccid as a big, bad boss. As the head honcho. I can
only vaguely place what Lord Frederick even looks like at this point.
No, you can exactly remember the silhouette of him where you're like, wow, it's a silhouette of a big, bulbous walrus. He's a big, bulbous walrus.
I gotta know.
Yeah. I like them better than Tiki Tong, the way he looks. I even like them better than the Jungle Beat Kongs, the Kiss Kongs, as we called them, or Ghastly King or Cactus King. I like them better than that. I think as far as being original baddies in a Donkey Kong game, post-Rare, they look great.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that they also remind me of the Brutals in that you can see that they're all following very different archetypes, and their boss fights and the contraptions that they challenge you with will probably all follow, some similar archetypes as well. And I can like already sort of see the through line of what they're going to be like to challenge and how those things could recur throughout the game.
Yeah. I'm intrigued to see how they are as recurring antagonists. And I will say, so far, I don't really care for the baddies that we've seen throughout gameplay, but I also haven't really gotten close enough looks at most of them to form that strong of an opinion yet. They're sometimes a bit abstract. And I also feel like enemies are sort of taking a backseat to the exploration, the digging, the destruction, just the sheer amount of stuff you can do to explore and traverse this world. So it's kind of whatever for me. The baddies are sort of secondary to the robust and lively NPCs in the game more than anything. I think the NPCs make up for how I just don't care about the baddies at the moment.
Yeah, and I think that's probably going to be a consequence of what we were talking about earlier with the gameplay focus being so built around, near total destruction of all the environments. That means that Donkey Kong himself has to be like extremely, extremely capable and extremely powerful. But as a result of that, like the baddies are, I think, probably for the most part going to take a bit of a backseat.
Yes, and there is one baddie in particular, and people have been talking about it in our chat right now, the Buzzoids, and we've gotten a closer look at them, I think, in today's Treehouse stream, and they do visually resemble zingers in a little bit of like eyes and antenna, and people are like, is there a connection there? And I'm like, well, that would be dumb, because Buzz is another bee from Donkey Kong. They've got big green or pink faces with teeth, and they got buzzsaws on the back. I'm joking.
True.
I don't think it's dumb that they're called Buzzoids. There's some stuff going on with the baddies in this game that maybe we need to save for a little bit later when we talk about this ambiguous banana bandit. And I don't want to raise expectations too much or be like, oh, we got some scoop for you, because we don't. It's all speculation, but it's warranted speculation. I'll just say
I
that
think so,
much.
yeah.
Yeah. Odd Rock, Josh, because Donkey Kong, he explores after Voidco pushed the mine and Ingot Isle into this subterranean realm, or at least the top level of it. They're I don't think they're in the underground world yet, but it's kind of like pushed toward the entrance of the underground world. After this happens, Donkey Kong explores what seems to be like a meteor that came down after the fact. And it turns out to be this little companion, this little purple rocky companion with the wonky eyes, to quote the Stanley the Bugman rap, that we've seen in the trailer, in the screenshots, in the gameplay footage, in the promotional artwork. And his name is Odd Rock, which I have to admit is a bit of a letdown after Freezer pitched me Roxanne. And I was just like, yeah, fucking Roxanne, let's do it. No, it's Odd Rock, which is fine. I'll get used to it.
See, so it's clear to me that the identity and the, like, who this character is going to be, like, some sort of a focus within the game, I believe. Because, like, when he joins you, like, the on-screen dialogue comes up, it doesn't say his name is literally Odd Rock, it just says the Odd Rock joins you.
Yeah.
But yeah. I think that's also used as, like, a proper noun with, like, capital O, capital R. So it's a little unclear.
Dwayne the Odd Rock Johnson, everyone.
Oh, by the way, follow up on the last episode, you were suggesting that perhaps you could call him Chip, and was it Dustin on the last episode with you?
Malik
was talking about Chip from off of Sonic Unleashed, and I wanted to tell you that if you want to understand Chip from off of Sonic Unleashed, he sounds and acts a lot like Tricky from off of Star Fox Adventures.
Oh, lovely. I love that.
Mm-hmm. I knew that would be a good comparison point for you.
I am one of the biggest Tricky fans on the planet, so hell yeah. So, like, I didn't expect to be won over within 24 hours by Odd Rock. I didn't. I thought this was going to have to grow on me a little bit, Josh. I thought this was a bit too weird. I talked about Sir Blobsworth on the last conversation and how this was
that story, by the way. That was great.
This was an actual nightmare I had before they announced Donkey Kong Country 3, but I knew they were going to announce Donkey Kong Country 3 soon, and I had a nightmare that Diddy was once again the star, but his new sidekick was a living bit of protoplasm, this purple sludge with a monocle and a top hat called Sir Blobsworth. And that became the go-to, like, idea of, like, what if Donkey Kong was paired with a character who wasn't a Kong? It would be Sir Blobsworth. And here we are with a lumpy potato of a sidekick who's purple, And I'm like, oh my God, Sir Blobsworth came true. So I thought this was going to have to grow on me, even if this was just clearly like a Cappy situation. Like Nintendo EPD is not viewing this as replacement Diddy Kong. They're not viewing this as a new sidekick for Donkey Kong. This is a mechanic for this 3D Donkey Kong game, as we've seen in so many 3D Super Mario games. And they made it a living creature because that's what works best. And hell yeah, I agree with that. But, like, no, Diddy to EPD is the Luigi to Donkey Kong's Mario, or the Tails to a Sonic. So it makes sense that it would be something else. But, yeah, like you said, watching the trailer, I just wanted to see Diddy, but watching Donkey Kong's initial interactions with how he meets Oddrock and what transpires between the two of them, this is what sold me not only on Oddrock, but on Donkey Kong's depiction in this game, on Nintendo EPD's portrayal of Donkey Kong. And maybe it's just because my wife and I adopted a rescue dog who had been abused, who suffers from severe anxiety as a result and constantly needs comforted and reassured. And she's the sweetest, most like loving creature I've ever known in my life. Like just boundless amounts of love and like actual caring about people. She's very like protective of her people, but it did like profoundly change the way I view other living creatures having this dog in my life. And seeing Oddrock tremble in fear from Donkey Kong. I've seen this with my own dog, Josh, and seeing Donkey Kong then have to soothe Oddrock, to immediately feel concern for this creature, this strange creature he does not know, and was initially like bewildered and frightened by, and even initially a little bit aggressive with, to see him then reach out and comfort and reassure and then whistle, use music to soothe him. This isn't toothy grin jackass Donkey Kong from Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, from Mario vs. Donkey Kong, from so many buyout era cameo games. This is a caring Donkey Kong, the same one who mentored Diddy. He's got empathy. He's got compassion. Yes, he's strong. Yes, he can pulverize everything in his path, but he has a heart, Josh. They sold me on Oddrock.
You know, I know, at least speaking for myself, I often, you know, a lot of times when I'm interested in a game, like I won't watch the Treehouse streams, and I'll actually even try to stay away from trailers and stuff like that, just because I know, once I know I'm gonna get it, like I'm not gonna, I want to experience that stuff for myself when the game comes out. Nonetheless, if you haven't seen this, if you too have, like maybe skipped the Treehouse streams, at least look up this scene, because it really is extremely well done.
Thankfully, Nintendo, they have isolated the Treehouse segments with Donkey Kong Bananza, so you can just watch them without having to scroll through the entire Treehouse presentation. But yeah, like, it sold me on Donkey Kong, and it sold me on Oddrock, because Oddrock is this just sweet little guy. And yeah, you're right, there's a mystery behind him, because he's got Voidco, he's got the Voidco material he's coated with.
Yeah, so there are these sections in the game where these devices will make, like, parts of the world voided. That's the terminology that the Treehouse staff used. And it's purple, and it looks strikingly unnatural. And those chunks of the level cannot be interacted with. Like, Donkey Kong can't crash through them, he can't break them. He can, like, run around on top of them, but he has to, like, get Oddrock and then whistle with him to, like, break the chain on the device that's causing this. But Oddrock himself is also covered in this very same material.
Yes. So the question therein is, if you're right, and of course we're just calling him Oddrock because he doesn't seem to know his name or be able to communicate his name, what is actually underneath Oddrock? Is he actually an Oddrock? Or is there... I've heard some theories. Plug your ears if you don't...
Yep.
Could this be Diddy? Could this...
Yeah, that's the first one I heard.
I don't know. That would be wild if it was. But he seems to have no memory of who he was or who they were. And like when he initially sees Donkey Kong, he's frightened.
Right. That seeing that was the point where I was like, I don't think this is supposed to be Diddy.
But at the same time, who knows? If Diddy has completely forgotten who he is, if he's been coded,
Sure.
if he's been voided, and like if he was also here or was following Donkey Kong or whatever, and he got voided, maybe that's like one of the twists of the game. I don't know.
And I think one thing that does point to that anyway is that, like, Oddrock, it's different with Mario because Luigi never functioned as a gameplay character that was, like, permanently attached to Mario,
Yeah.
Whereas in the Retro Studios games, the helper Kongs, Diddy, Dixie, and Cranky would ride on Donkey Kong's shoulder, which is exactly where Oddrock perches during game while DK is running around.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is the Cappy, but it has so much personality, and I love the relationship he has with Donkey Kong. Of course, the treehouse, they initially picked the mean dialogue choice where you can say, no, I don't want you to join me, or whatever. And Oddrock just like jams onto his back anyway, and Donkey Kong's like, I
love Donkey Kong's expression in that shot, yeah.
Yeah. So I love this. I love this, Josh. As Breaking Bad universe fans say, bravo Vince.
Bravo Vince.
Bravo Vine. This is, I think, one of the more controversial elements of the game, and I was just sold on it on day 2. So I feel great about Oddrock, and I think no matter what Oddrock actually winds up being,
I was super sold on him, and as soon as they did that move where Donkey Kong can like roll around on the ground extremely quickly, and while he was doing that, once he got Oddrock starts like running on top of him, like sort of like you'd see in like an old timey cartoon when a character was like standing on top of a giant record player.
Yeah. I mean,
like that was just. It also reminded me of the way Laylee runs on top of Yuka.
Yeah, or even a little bit of like running on Kiddy Kong in DKC3, or running on Donkey Kong in Tropical Freeze or Return. So yeah, like Oddrock, I think I'm gonna grow to love that guy. So it really helps.
Turned out to be Kiddy Kong, then I would have to. I don't know. I would probably just cancel my pre-order. To be honest with you,
dude, what if Kiddy Kong was voided like back in the 90s, and that's how he would still be a baby today? He hasn't aged because he's been trapped as an Oddrock.
I mean, I think that he honestly deserved that fate, and I'm glad that that's where he is.
Oh, but you love him now. He's Oddrock. Anyway,
that's how they'll get me. That's how they'll trick me.
I think just too, having so much dialogue in this game is something that has been sorely lacking from Donkey Kong games since the buyout. For it to be a 3D platformer, it gives them that benefit, but it's amazing how much can be communicated and sold to you through dialogue, through a little bit of context. And again, I'm going back to Professor Chops here and how Professor Chops was introduced to the fans. Not even given a name, just this random pig. Who are you? Doesn't matter. He's the pig. And like just a little bit of context would have gone a long way towards helping us accept him as part of the cast.
We were praising Cranky's dialogue earlier, and then like fairly so. It's extremely, extremely good stuff, and very accurately depicts like what I think Cranky is supposed to feel like. But that goes for all the dialogue that we saw in the game. Like it really pops. It really sells the world. It really, it's entertaining to read and to like. and it helps you, get a little more immersed in the world and want to explore it and want to hang out there.
Absolutely. I love it. So you talked a little bit about the moves and what Donkey Kong is capable of doing. You talked about rolling. Roll jumping is back.
Okay, I want to talk about this because, we have often talked about how the reason that one of the biggest reasons that our divergent styles of content appeal to each other so much is because we cover each other's blind spots.
Yeah.
The things that I love and appreciate very naturally and very easily are things that you also appreciate, but might not notice so much on your own, and vice versa. So for me, okay, more than Cranky being there, more than Ramby being there, more than anything else, what sold me on the game, 100%, what pushed me over the edge, was learning that roll jumping was in there. Because as soon as I learned that, I was like, all right, they get it. This is gonna be fine. Because I'm very naturally mechanically and gameplay oriented. So
yeah. No,
and that's so the being able to roll and the way that rolling works and being able to roll jump is so core to the identity of the Donkey Kong Country series to me, and to a lot of what that Rare team made, since it was also in Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie. So as soon as I found out that was there, I'm like, all right, this is going to be great. And then actually seeing it in action and seeing the way that it works and seeing the Treehouse team use it, and just I'm already thinking about the movement possibilities with this game and how fun it's going to be just to navigate within the world.
Oh yeah, for sure. It looks so much fun to play, and that's the other thing is it's not just, oh yeah, I get another 3D Donkey Kong platformer. It's this Donkey Kong 3D platformer looks so much fun. Just the ability to destroy the environment, to dig into the earth, everything stays destroyed. The paths you clear remain cleared, which I imagine they've jerry-rigged it so you can't get stuck anywhere. But
right.
Donkey Kong can also scale walls, and he's very versatile in this game. He's using his roll jumping from the country games. He's using his destructive powers from Jungle Beat. He's using his climbing skills from King of Swing. He's doing it all. It
also looked like there was something you could do where you could start rolling in the air and get forward momentum off of that. And I'm really curious to see how that works.
Yeah, I don't know.
Mario Odyssey had something very similar with being able to do a mid-air dive. You could throw Cappy and then mid-air dive at him and jump off of him and then dive again.
Right.
So there were some really crazy movement options you could do in that game.
We already mentioned whistling with Odd Rock and how that removes the voided terrain. I love that music is incorporated, because music has always been an element of the Donkey Kong series since, the scrapped music game in the arcade era. For the NES, but more specifically though, even the Rare era incorporated musical instruments. Going back as far as Donkey Kong dropping his boombox on Cranky and the opening of Donkey Kong Country, music has always been an important element of the Kong's lifestyle. So I feel like Donkey Kong whistling is a Miyamoto pitch. I feel like that's his thing. I want Donkey Kong to be able to whistle and soothe evil, calm evil things down in this game with the sound of his melody.
That makes sense, because we do know that Miyamoto was the one who suggested that the retro team incorporate blowing, so it's not that far off.
It also reminds me of, this is another Superman reference. This reminds me of the DC Comics crossover Final Crisis by Grant Morrison. And one of the resolutions of that was, the story is bonkers, but it's about Darkseid, the evil new god, dies and is reincarnated on Earth, and he's dragging Earth into an evil singularity that's destroying the universe. Anyway, long story short, what happens is they remove Darkseid from the body he's possessing, and then Superman whistles to destroy his soul. Because what destroys evil, malice? Music. Like the purity of music, the what rhythmically binds us together as a people, as society. So, yeah, it kind of reminds me of
I'm not going to be able to follow you down Superman-related tangents. However, I was on an episode about 4 or 5 years ago when we were talking about don't worry, Donkey Kong fans, it's going to be fine. Called It's Always Sunny in Donkey Kong Country. At the time, I didn't understand the references you were making, but now I will. So if you want to do another one of those sometime.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Barrel blasting. Barrel blasting is in the game. Barrel cannons are in the game. They've got a neon aesthetic. It looks sweet as hell. It's right up DKVine's alley. Obviously, our site had a neon aesthetic from 2004 to 2010. We still use neon avatars on our forum. We love neon at DKVine. So to have barrel cannons with the arrow rendered as a neon sign, it's almost like somebody was watching us. Or maybe, like, we used to make jokes about the Payon spy. You know, somebody at Payon knew exactly what we wanted in their games. But I think what's more likely happening here is that there's something that's like a shared collective damage among Donkey Kong fans worldwide. And so because we have Donkey Kong fans making this game at Nintendo EPD, they share the same damage that we did back in 2004, where they're like, yeah, we got to get neon in there.
Well, neon is also just seems to be the aesthetic on that ingot Hyle.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, will that carry through all the barrels in the game, or is that just because I think we saw it outside of that specific location?
We did. We saw it in the lagoon.
Right. Yeah.
And there's a whole barrel blasting sequence you can go into, like, very, very much stylized after sort of Donkey Kong 64, although it's not from like first person perspective when you're blasting out of the barrels. But yeah, like, I think that what Ingot Hyle, the mining operation they've got going on there, it's very much like built like an old mining town, and they've got like all these comforts built in, like these pop-up casinos, gambling huts, probably bordellos.
Right, and of course, like we talked about earlier, they leave you wanting more. The Treehouse team stopped exploring that area right as they got there.
Yeah. It almost reminded me of, again, this is comic book Marvel reference this time, but Nowhere from Guardians of the Galaxy. The big, again, it's a dead god, but in this case, they're mining the dead god's head. And this was from the first 2014 Guardians of the Galaxy movie. And so it's a big mining operation in this god's head called Nowhere. And they've got gambling, they've got prostitution, so that's what Ingot Hyle reminds me of. And I think that these barrel cannons might have been brought in by the monkey miners. And when Ingot Hyle was pushed into the earth, these barrel cannons might have like tumbled down into the subterranean realms of the underground world.
That would make sense, yeah.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
As much sense as floating barrels that launch you places makes ever, so.
Perfectly logical, Josh. I won't have you question the logic of the DKE, which has always made complete sense and always adheres to the reality we ourselves live in.
So where is Dixie's tail?
It's tucked in her shirt. Andre points out the blast barrels in the 2D segment also have the neon arrows, which is interesting if that part actually takes place on Donkey Kong Island. I don't know if it takes place on Donkey Kong Island or if it's like an LSD fantasy of Donkey Kong Island. I don't have enough context there yet.
Yeah, it's interesting how we haven't seen any more of that outside of the trailer so far, either in like the events that people have gone to or in the Treehouse trailers. Because, like, Mario Odyssey had all kinds of sections where you would go into a pipe and Mario would come out and he'd be like a little 8-bit sprite, and all the enemies would also be that. So I'm wondering if, like, this is that game's equivalent, if there will be, you know, little specific 2D sections that don't change the style of the characters the same way, but maybe change the the perspective that you're playing from, and perhaps all those areas will look ACM rendered or call back to the original games in some way.
I think so. I think that's what it is. That's the read I got on it. I've seen theories even in the live stream chat just now, or a little bit ago, where people said like they thought it was like the prologue of the game to show how Donkey Kong got to Ingot Isle. I don't think that's the case, though. I think what we saw at the beginning of the trio, like him bursting through the cave wall, is the beginning of the game.
Yeah, I believe Mario Galaxy 2 had an entirely 2D intro, so that might be where people are getting that notion.
Okay, I think
I agree. I think there's going to be more to it than just an intro.
Yeah, I do think that would be a bit weird. Like Galaxy 2, it might make sense, but I think like rooting gamers in a new style, it'd be weird to then immediately yank the way they just learned how to play the game away from them and be like, okay, now it's a 3D adventure with different mechanics, and that was just a fake out. Like I don't know. That would be the kind of thing that would feel antithetical to how Nintendo usually operates, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, and like Mario Galaxy 2, to be clear, even though it did have a 2D intro, it also had, 2D-ish sections within a lot of its levels, too.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well,
although nothing as overt as Odyssey's, we're going to switch you to a strict 8-bit style.
Yeah. Turf
But I am interested to see more of that.
Turf surfing, Josh. Which, love the name. Great name. Steak and lobster on the same plate. I'm a vegan, so no thanks, but I can see the appeal. And this is where Donkey Kong takes a chunk, just a chunk of whatever, and he surfs around on it on the ground. And eventually the chunk, the boulder, the debris will break down over time. So it's not like you can just keep Tony Hawking throughout the entire world. But Josh, I can't help but feel, and you know where I'm going with this because you were on the episode where I divulged this. I can't help but feel this is quite similar to the concept of vine grinding from Vicarious Visions 3D Donkey Kong project that was in development betwixt Tropical Freeze and Bananza. And I wonder, knowing what, like, how that project fell through and then Nintendo took it in internally, like, there's always a question, are they going to follow up on anything from the Freedom Project, as it was referred to internally? Are they going to take any inspiration from it? And usually the answer is probably not. It's probably going to be 3D, but it's probably not going to really be just picking up the baton from where it was dropped. They're going to do their own thing. But maybe there's going to be a little bit here or there. I think this is the little bit here from there.
Now, my concern there is, that being the case, why doesn't Donkey Kong don banana shoes while he's doing this?
Well, here's the thing. We'll talk about the style shop in a bit. Maybe he can buy them.
That's a good point. I didn't think of that. I was making a joke, but you're right.
Turf surfing. I love it. This game looks so much fun. Just seeing the gameplay outside of the trailer really sold me on pretty much everything.
Yeah, and also just having the Treehouse staff there to, like, provide that context, to show off how these mechanics worked. There's a term that I see a lot nowadays, but I think it's a good one. I hear it a lot. It's player expression. And as I understand it, the way that, the thing that means is, like, is there one correct way to do things? Is there some, like, there's some idea of how you're supposed to approach this thing and move through this world and platform across these areas, or whatever the case may be. Yeah. And is that the only way to do it? Or does the game give you multiple options and give you lots of ways to approach different objects? And I think the player expression in this game is going to be off the charts. Not just because of Donkey Kong's, like, movement abilities, but also his ability to tear up pieces of the world. Like, there's a part in the Treehouse presentation where they realize, okay, well, there's this conveyor belt and Donkey Kong can't, fit through the grate. So what can he do? So he starts tearing into the ground on the conveyor belt and gets under the grate that way. And then when they leave, they demonstrate that they could have also just dug out the wall next to the conveyor belt and, like, gone around.
Yeah. It's great. It reminds me of like the debates when Ukulele came out. And I know Ukulele was a flawed game. I still really like it, but I understand it's flawed and it doesn't do a lot of things that are conventionally game design 101. But there were a lot of challenges in Ukulele where you could kind of figure out your own way to get the pagey. And it was a criticism against the game at the time, but I think whether that was intentional or not, that's where the industry is caught up to. And I
love that about Ukulele, how you could basically there was no part of the terrain that you couldn't stand on if you could get to it.
Yeah. No, I loved how tactile Ukulele. And I know it was made in Unity, but like it just felt very tangible. I don't know. There's like nothing you couldn't kick or touch and I feel like the industry has caught up to, I think with Yuka Replay, there's going to be more of a like incentive to lean into that, but have it be more polished and make it seem like less of a mistake and have some foresight with that, especially with all the moves being accessible from the start, apparently. So to see that in 3D Donkey Kong 2, it's kind of validating and it's really cool to see. And it's honestly the kind of experience I dreamed of back in the day when I was dreaming about 3D Donkey Kong in the first place. Maybe not this level of I'm going to dig through tunnels and the ground and whatever. Like I wasn't foreseeing that, but just the ability to go anywhere, to do anything. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And I'll also say that related to player expression, I think that's something that Donkey Kong 64 was very often lacking in.
Oh, for sure.
There's one correct way the game wants you to do things, and you do that.
And it's all
and
color-coded.
Like to a certain extent, I'm not saying that like more player expression is infinitely a good thing, but like there can be different balances of it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we learned today in the second Nintendo Treehouse event that there's a photo mode because Donkey Kong is so expressive in this game. And honestly, this is probably the most expressive I've ever seen a DKU character. The amount of facial tics he has. I mean, it exceeds even Conker. You know, Conker was the go-to standard for expressive characters, but Donkey Kong is really just having a time of it. He's got an elastic face in this one. And so you can take photos, you can preserve the moment. It's cool to see. Really be fun to get screenshots that way.
Yeah, whatever happened in the treehouse today, I haven't seen that. I got up and had some breakfast and went to the gym. And then by the time I got out of there, it was time to have lunch and then do this. So anything that happened today, that'll be new to me.
Well, we also learned about teleporting today, Josh, which
nice.
Teleporting is the fast travel system in the game where you can jump in the mouth of an eel, a giant blue eel with an orange mouth and like a fin on the top of his head.
And then that is the eel like a network, or does the eel technically like move you physically to different locations?
I don't know if this is actually a living creature. It could just be similar to the dragon ports from Jungle Beat, the space dragon like tunnels you get sucked into. So kind of similar to that, and then that makes me think, are these the space dragons? I don't know, but it is kind of fun to see, and teleporting is such a dumb name. I love it.
I mean, that we had banana porting before.
Yes. At least teleporting is a very dumb pun, and I always appreciate a very dumb pun.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of those with this one.
Yeah. What I also love and appreciate is the setting of this game, which, again, the trailer almost did a disservice because it just didn't seem like a Donkey Kong environment. Not the kind of Donkey Kong environment we would fantasize about for the trailer for a 3D Donkey Kong game. But, you know, Ingot Isle, which we've talked about, which is really just the starting location, but the underground world is what Nintendo's website for the game is calling it. Now, they have been wrong before. Banandium gems are called golden bananas. Get off. Come on. But for the lack of anything better right now, we're going to call it the underground world. And maybe it even won't have a name in the game, and that's just what we call it. Similar to how the home terrain of the Snowmads, where the Snowmads came from, we still call the North Seas, all based on the errant comet Iwata made in the Tropical Freeze reveal. It's like, well, okay, they're from the North Seas. That's canon.
Now, do you think Matt is going to go to the trouble of naming every individual monkey?
Yeah, I hadn't considered that. That's Daryl. That's Jimmy over there.
That's Chuck.
Chuck, yeah. Bravo Vince. But right? I think that having the context for what we were seeing and the actual setting and the actual story of the game, because Donkey Kong goes into this underground world. And Thursday, I was starting to realize, day 2, it was starting to dawn on me. I was really digging this game, no pun intended. I was really starting to appreciate everything I was seeing. I was getting really excited about the setting. And sure, Cranky being there helped, but there's something else, and I was trying to figure out why. And then it hit upon me what this game was presenting and what we were seeing. Especially when we saw that treehouse presentation and they started talking about how the subterranean level we were in was directly underneath the ocean floor. And we were seeing the ocean actually leak into this environment. And actually, there was like a reflective water effect throughout the world from being underneath the sea. And it hit upon me that this game is taking Donkey Kong through an adventure into the hollow earth. Now, like Lagoon Lair taking place beneath the ocean floor, that's bonkers. That's nonsense. But the hollow earth conceit is straight out of vintage fantasy. It's been around now for over a century, longer than that. But, early 20th century pulp novels often had this kind of setting, 1930s film serials, vintage classic fantasy novels. This is the same era of stuff that Rare drew so much inspiration from when they recontextualized and built Donkey Kong's world in 1993 and 1994. Like, the first 3 Donkey Kong Country games in particular are just loaded with tropes from Pulp Fiction, from things like, not the movie Pulp Fiction, I'm talking about actual Pulp Fiction.
Actual Pulp Fiction, right.
Yeah. So many things from, like, mythology, but also the writings of Jules Verne, Edgar Rice Burroughs, Robert Louis Stevenson, and included among them, those authors, fantastical lost worlds just beneath our feet. We just have to go a little bit deeper and we're in this almost alien terrain. Bananza's setting continues that tradition in a brilliant way.
I agree, and I also think that it's not something that you get a lot of in video games. Or if you, like, when I first heard about this was the idea and that this is what was happening, you immediately worry, okay, well, does that mean the whole game is just going to be look like the minecart and cave levels in Donkey Kong Country 1? Is it gonna struggle with being too dark or dingy or whatever like that? And the answer is no, it absolutely doesn't. And I think the lagoon stage is a really good example of that, because you can also, being beneath the surface can also mean being beneath the sea. So you can still get, those bright blue skies.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like, looking at the footage and screenshots we've seen of the different layers, the skybox is never a sky, but it's never always just bleak or depressing or dreary. It's not like you're just spelunking.
There are no snowmans up there.
Yeah. It's not like you're spelunking for 40 hours or 60 hours or 120 hours. Like, these are fantasy worlds set deep beneath the earth. And I've heard some people bring up the recent, like, Godzilla Kong film that played with the notion, but Hollow Earth goes way, 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 way back. I mean, there's still conspiracy theorists who believe in it. So I think there's something very primal about it, something just baked into early legends and superstitions of the human race, in the same way that like reptilian humanoids in the Kremlins just make such an effective counterpart to the Kongs. It's just something in our DNA speaks to us about this setting.
I think it's also just, when you're a kid, you always wonder, I remember doing this with my friends. How deep can we dig a hole?
Yeah, for sure.
When I get my hands on this game, one of the first things I'm going to do is find out what happens if you just dig straight down for as long as you can.
And see, as somebody who's scared of boundary breaking, it's really going to take a while to get used to this idea. But I know that the Donkey Kong series wasn't just based on highbrow classic fantasy. Oh, yeah, the classics in the library. That's what Rare read. But because, there was like Lucasfilm imagery. I mean, there was a lot of like Action Man, Jungle Explorer tropes in Donkey Kong Country, but they were also just ripping off Indiana Jones because that's what the creators grew up with. There's the Ewok village, so there was that, but there's also just a lot more to it than, hell, there was fucking Charles Dickens jokes and, references to Jules Verne. And sometimes I felt like that's what Retro's games were lacking a little bit. And it sounds like I'm slagging off on Retro a lot today. I'm not. I love those two games. I really do. But sometimes I felt like their primary inspiration for their vision of Donkey Kong was like DreamWorks films. And maybe they weren't going far back enough. And it's probably too reductive to say that. And I'm being too dismissive, but I'm sorry, Josh. I just like my Donkey Kong to be sophisticated and refined and,
a little more highbrow Donkey Kong experience, yes.
This is a highbrow Donkey Kong. Look how far they lifted it. I don't know, like...
Oh my god. Okay, it took me a second. But I was like, geez.
There is a discussion
paying off now.
There is a discussion and a debate in animation circles right now, which I primarily know from Dustin and Malik, but it's about how like recent animated projects and creators, they're made by people who the only media they've ever really consumed or cared about are other cartoons, other animated properties. While the cartoons they grew up watching, those creators were inspired by everything across literature, film, broader pop culture. And so, like, you've lost a little bit of soul in certain recent things because they're just calling back to other cartoons and there's no, like, deeper resonance in it. And I can't really speak to that debate because that's not my world. That's not my jam. But that's what it reminded me of when I was thinking about this and how Donkey Kong Bananza is just effectively, like, speaking to the washed out English major in me,
Right. Well, I think the retro games, to get at what you were talking about with them, they were and are absolutely exceptional video games.
Oh, absolutely. Like, again, I'm not disputing that. I don't think I've turned on the retro games just because we have a new Donkey Kong game. That's not the case.
Right. But I do think that there is something that you're identifying there in that, like, the retro games, while being exceptional video games, they didn't, I don't know. They had whatever soul that they had, it was very different than the one that the Rare games had. And I love them both. I would not really realistically be able to put one over the other in terms of like quality or even in terms of how much I love them. I love them both for very different reasons. But it is inevitable. I can't deny that they are different reasons.
Yeah. For sure.
One does not hit the same as the other does.
Yeah. And this is hitting for me in a lot of ways that Rare's Donkey Kong hit for me, just from what we've seen so far. So I'm really excited about it. And, we are in this underground world, these subterranean lands populated by all sorts of weirdos. And it seems like the deeper you get, the weirder it probably gets. We do have the Ostrich Kingdom. We do have like the Monkey Kingdom, which I feel like is earlier on. It's in like the actual, lagoon layer. It's going to take a while to get used to that phrasing.
Now, that's interesting, too, because that's definitely something that Mario Odyssey did very well, is that, like, each kingdom had sort of its own archetype of citizens. And that didn't mean that they were exclusive to that area, just that they were primarily encountered there. And, like, sometimes, you'd see a citizen of one kingdom and then much later in the game come upon a whole, a whole kingdom of them.
Right.
So, like, I'm wondering, are the ostriches and the monkeys indicative of that? Is each sort of area of the game going to have its own sort of, animal archetype?
I think so. I do.
But so.
You keep going deeper, and of course you're deep beneath the Earth's crust. So there are fossils. There are fossils everywhere, Josh. And the fossils, they're a collectible that you then trade in something called the Style Shop for new outfits. And, that's really cool. The fossils themselves seems like they will carry many references, callbacks, and celebration of the Donkey Kong series, because we've seen some prehistoric critters like dinos and mollusk, but that's also where we saw a Noddy. There's a Noddy fossil. And in the HUD of a certain screenshot, not only do we see like it looks to be in the ostrich layer. You can collect Noddy fossils, but you can also collect spider fossils, and you can collect pig fossils. But the pig fossils look like they're wearing spectacles. They look like Professor Chops. And, of course, it couldn't be Professor Chops. Professor Chops did not die eons ago, but I think they could be prehistoric ancestors of the Oinks, which are Professor Chops' people. And, I mean, we could be viewing this fossil icon on the HUD incorrectly, and this pig is not wearing glasses, but it damn well sure looks like Professor Chops, just like that beaver looks like a Noddy, and we've had it confirmed it is a Noddy because we've seen the fossil itself, and by God, King, that's a Noddy! That's Noddy's music!
Stone cold! Stone cold!
Noddy comes out, just starts giving the finger to everyone, hasn't been seen since 1999, gives a stone cold stunner.
It's not an entirely inaccurate depiction, because even before DKVine knew about Cranky, seeing that Noddy was like such a hope spot.
Yeah. It really was like, to again go back to professional wrestling parlance, it popped the crowd for sure.
It did, yeah.
So, yeah, I think we could potentially be seeing lots of critters from throughout the Donkey Kong series as fossils. And then you go to the Style Shop, and so many people were making such a big, huge damn stink out of DK wearing miner gear in the trailer. Or just like confused by the overalls. Like, why is he wearing Mario's clothes? It's like, well, he's wearing mining clothes because he was mining.
Right.
And maybe Donkey Kong in a miner's hat isn't that unusual to me because of how often in my life I've stared at the renders of Donkey Kong wearing a miner's hat from Donkey Kong Country.
Yeah, I was like, my main concern while I was watching the trailer for the first time, in as much as I could think about anything in that moment, was like, okay, but I kind of hope he's not wearing pants through the whole game. Like, I want to see that ass, You
want to see ass, yeah.
And then at the very end of the trailer, when they reveal the release date, 7/17, like that's when you see Donkey Kong without the pants on. And I'm like, okay, well, that probably indicates that he's not going to, and then of course, it wasn't too long later that we found out that indeed he will not always be wearing pants.
That was a great end to the trailer when he ripped his pants off like a male stripper.
It was, yeah. It's what I was waiting for the whole time, honestly.
He turns around, he smacks one cheek and winks to you. And then the day comes up. Yeah, they knew what the fans really like. The Donkey Kong. I mean,
that's what I come to Donkey Kong for.
It's ironic. Like we're just laughing, but like that is the first thing we do look for in any new Donkey Kong model is how pert is the ass. It's only because Rare conditioned us that the hallmark of a good Donkey Kong design is the ass, because they released that render of Donkey Kong's ass and Nintendo ran with it. And I don't even think that was Rare's intention necessarily. It was just in the asset
I heard
pack.
recently that they put that out. They'd given that to Nintendo. I can't remember where I heard this, so somebody check me on this before you run with it. But they put that out there for like merchandising reasons. Like, if you make a Donkey Kong toy, for example, here's what his proportions are supposed to be. And then, of course, this is the play it loud era of like gross out humor and stuff. So Nintendo just runs with it and puts it everywhere.
Yeah. It's like, your parents say not to jump up this gorilla's asshole, but are you going to listen to them?
Right. Just Andre understood my innuendo. Thank you.
Oh. We've seen DK in outfits before, like I said. Alternate wardrobes has just become a thing in 3D games. This isn't atypical of the era we find ourselves in. Obviously, Odyssey is the big go-to example, and again, apropos for who's developing this. But, I mean, Yuka Replayly is doing it now. Demon Turf did it. Demon Tides is doing it. Even
Craft
Banjo
4 did it.
Yeah, even Banjo had a tuxedo at the end of Nuts and Bolts.
Yeah, and Odyssey also, I'm very excited about this because Odyssey also just did it extremely, extremely well. Like, there were a couple of themed costumes for every single kingdom in the game. And there were then also some just very deep cuts. Like, there was a depiction of Mario in space that aired in a Satellaview commercial in Japan. Like, at the very end, you only saw him in it for a few seconds. Yeah. And they included that outfit.
Yeah, it's in Mario Kart Tour.
Like, it makes me very excited as to what kind of deep cuts they might go for Donkey Kong.
Well, we're seeing this in Mario Kart now, too. I just brought up Tour, but like Mario Kart World's going to have all the different costumes, both from Tour and also new ones. I mean, Donkey Kong's got a new one in Mario Kart World. So, I'm really excited about this. I've seen, in the comments, Snake Fighter says they want a classic, like, Donkey Kong skin, like Mario Odyssey 64 skin, put in the ACM model, put in the original 1994 hot dog finger Donkey Kong with the killer dynamite ass that parents are afraid of.
Yeah, and I think that has a pretty damn good likelihood of happening.
You know, before we started this, I would have said nah, but the only thing is, thinking about the dithered plastic palm trees and talking about them with you, I'm like, well, no, they clearly have love for that. So it's possible. It's possible.
Oh, yeah. Just Andre points out that in Odyssey, Odyssey also had like very expansive amiibo support for pretty much all the Nintendo franchises, not the Pokemon stuff, but one of those, like, you could unlock more costumes by scanning an amiibo. So, for example, if you scan Diddy Kong, you would be able to then dress Mario in a little Diddy Kong costume, complete with, like, the fur and the hat and the tail.
Or if you scan in Banjo-Kazooie, Donkey Kong's wearing tight yellow shorts, and Odd Rock becomes a bird. Sure.
I mean, I'm not holding my breath, but I wouldn't be that surprised either.
Yeah. And we know the Odyssey team also loves Banjo-Kazooie, so they're just Rare fans. So, yeah, it also, beyond just what wardrobes we might see, Josh, is anybody going to be running the style shop? Is there going to be an NPC behind a counter?
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. I mean, we haven't seen the style shop yet, so that feels a little conspicuous, doesn't it?
It feels like maybe they're being a little withholding right now, but I'm not saying it could just be a menu. It could just be something boring, but
I will say it wasn't just a menu in Odyssey, so that seems unlikely.
Like what we've seen so far, they're not afraid to go there, and you know, Funky is a likely culprit given he ran the Flying By, and given the Flying By is the merchandise shop in the theme park, and so they might want some synergy there. But I've also heard Swanky Kong as a plausible theory, and I can't help but love that to death. Not only because, of course, I'm ride or die with Swanky Kong, but Swanky Kong was in the Super Mario Brothers movie. Very
Sure.
interesting, very curious. And in addition to being a tacky and flamboyant host and carnival barker, he could also be a resident fashionista of the Kongs.
That would, yeah, I feel like that would actually fit. I wouldn't be surprised either way, but I feel like that would actually fit him a little bit better than it would Funky.
Yeah.
I think that's just because I associate Funky so much more closely with, like, different gameplay dynamics.
And also, I think Funky wouldn't really care about what he's wearing. I mean, he just goes around in tattered jorts and like a tank top, and he's dirty sometimes, or he's just wearing, swimming trunks. And I think like Swanky Kong is the one who has got like the vested suit, and he wears a toupee at times, and he's all just very like, damn, I look good.
He's snazzy.
He's snazzy. So I do think there's a good chance we could see a Kong or Professor Chops running the style shop. But let's get to the K rule of it all, Josh. Let's get to the thing I have been dodging and weaving this entire podcast. Will King K. Rool or some wacky persona of his make an appearance in Donkey Kong Bananza? And let me just say, before we really launch into it, okay, I don't want to get anybody's hopes up. I'm not here to deliberately raise expectations. I am so tired of doing that with this game existing at all for the past 7 years that I'm not going to spend the next few months being like, oh, but maybe we'll see K. Rool. Ooh, who's to say? Because I don't know. I don't know anything, and it wouldn't be responsible of me to pretend like I know anything about it. I can provide people a few nuggets to tide you over. They're not made of Banandium, but that means they won't explode if you sit on them wrong. I'm gonna use another analogy. I'm going to wiggle my sexy little toes in these waters of discourse, but only the tips of them. We're not going to put the whole foot in. Now,
well, if you're going to put the full foot in, you really need to go in ankle first. Like, you get a much better fulcrum that way.
Yes, and also, if I'm going to use my whole foot, I need to save it for Yuka Replayly discussion, because Platonic are the bunch of deviant foot fetishists of the DKU.
True.
Donkey Kong is the ass. Ukulele is the foot. What's Banjo-Kazooie, I wonder?
The back.
All right. So.
And Conker's the soul.
No, Conker's big breast. Be it on a sunflower or. No, Conker's also poop fetish. Scat fetish. Anyway,
True.
I'm losing track of where I'm going with this. This is going to be a big moment,
K-Rool,
Josh.
Hyle, focus.
All right. So those of us who were around back in 2010, we remember the fan theories that, K. Rool, he was going to be the real secret boss of Donkey Kong Country Returns. He was probably going to be the one controlling the Tiki Tak tribe. There was that little bit of fraudulent fan art that was going around. And, it was a fine theory in 2010 because we had never had a Donkey Kong Country game without K. Rool. The only time he was not the primary antagonist in a Donkey Kong game from 1994 on was in Jungle Beat. Payon used them all 3 times, if you'll remember. So, like, K. Rool not being in the game felt weird then. And then Tropical Freeze was announced, and there were still some people holding out hope that K. Rool would be the final boss in Tropical Freeze, which amusingly almost came to pass in Tropical Freeze's Switch port had Nintendo not put the kibosh on Retro doing that because they were gearing up for K. Rool's reveal in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. So again.
Yeah, it's just a little unfortunate that the Tropical Freeze, Switch release had to come after Ultimate in that regard.
But Ultimate was such a bigger deal. I mean, I understand what you're saying, that if Tropical Freeze had come out after Ultimate.
I would not change what happened with Ultimate for nothing.
Yeah.
In retrospect, I kind of wish that we could have had Ultimate, then Tropical Freeze.
Yeah, but I understand too, given they wanted to get Donkey Kong on the Switch,
Right.
Knowing,
Sure.
like, that was right around the time they were taking it back in internally. So it's like, there's not going to be a Donkey Kong game ready for the Switch. We got to get Donkey Kong on the Switch. And it's not going to look that suspicious if it's Tropical Freeze.
And Tropical Freeze just so richly deserved to be on something that people actually owned.
It was also Tropical Freeze's redemption arc, right? It was where Tropical Freeze went from this maligned, underperforming game on the Wii U that people hated for not being Metroid to, one of the greatest 2D platformers of all time.
It's funny because, like, even by the time, like, I did my episode on Tropical Freeze before the Switch port was announced in toward the end of 2017, and even by then, like, that whole should have been Metroid thing was like ancient history to people, and people who weren't paying attention to Nintendo discourse at the time weren't even aware of it. So the tides were already changing even then.
It's amazing because every time I bring it up nowadays, I get a lot of pushback. They're like, bullshit. That never happened. And
point them to my episode. I do a pretty good job in the first 10 minutes.
I know. I try to show them the receipts, and then they don't respond. Yeah, but so anyway, like, looking at the trailer, realizing, the Kremlings aren't in this, there's still the possibility, we'll call it 2010 return syndrome, where you're like, but maybe. And I just want to say it's very possible that King K. Rool is not in this game. Because Voidco, they might be it as far as the masterminds. It might not be an Odyssey situation or whatever. Like,
now, the Treehouse team did call the three Kongs that oppose Donkey Kong, they did call them the primary antagonists of the game. But I wouldn't necessarily take that to confirm or deconfirm anything, because if K. Rool is a secret, of course they're going to say that.
Right, and also, it's possible K. Rool could be in the game and not be a primary antagonist. But it's possible he's not in there at all, and there's just no twist involved, and what we're seeing is what we're getting. But I think there's a little bit of smoke to this debate that there really wasn't with Returns, even with the benefit of hindsight. And I think there are a few aspects about this whole thing that aren't quite adding up. So, for starters, I'll just say I think the theme park discourse over the last year or two has really clouded everyone's vision that, holy shit, King K. Rool is the third playable Donkey Kong series character in Super Smash Brothers. What the hell? Like, I feel like people have memory hold Smash Ultimate, or they think it was just a one-off and that K. Rool will never be used again.
Well, yeah, because, like, Banjo was in the game, right? So that was probably part of the agreement with Microsoft because,
Yeah. For many years I've said Smash is the kingmaker. Smash wields so much influence over how characters are not only portrayed after the fact, but what characters are viewed as important, what characters are viewed as essential to a series identity. And I mean, like, we can only just look at, like, Captain Falcon. So many people know F-Zero now because of Captain Falcon being in that game. Not necessarily even from racing, So...
Yeah, I mean, I was a kid at the time, and I did not really know anything about what F-Zero was until Smash came out.
So when I was first learning about Donkey Kong EPD and what was happening or beginning to happen with the brand, it was around the time of King K. Rool's reveal in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And one of my sources, the enigmatic Dave Throat, did tell me that K. Rool and Smash was all sort of part of a master plan, or it was, they were leaning into it as part of the master plan based on the Smash Ballad. It was the first phase of rebuilding the Donkey Kong brand into one of the powerhouses of Nintendo, alongside Super Mario, alongside Zelda, alongside Animal Crossing, Splatoon. They wanted Donkey Kong to be right up there. And K. Rool being in Smash was part of that initial wave. So my question is, all right, cool. If that's still true, why go through the bother of bringing him back at all, of adhering to the massive fan demand, if he's not going to be in Donkey Kong games. Something's not adding up there. Secondly, as we've already said, we know that the people making this game, or quite a few people making this game at Nintendo EPD, are big Donkey Kong fans. And more than that, they're big Donkey Kong Country fans. There is that crossover with Odyssey, and the amount of love shown for Donkey Kong in New Donk City alone proves that. And yeah, in New Donk City, King K. Rool had a street named after him. So fuck, what the hell? I mean, we knew about that street before we even knew about him being in Smash, Josh. So we have direct, like, correlation there that this team thought enough of K. Rool to reference him on a street sign. Like, even independent of what Sakurai and his team were doing. So, putting all of that together, like I said, something is not adding up for me. Something is not sitting right with me. And I know 3D Mario always brings in new and different things to the series. They put Mario in strange locales away from the traditional Mushroom Kingdom, at least post Super Mario 64, discounting the more top-down 3D games. But Bowser is always involved. Bowser is the baddie. So if K. Rool has a future in Donkey Kong, and he very seemingly does, where is K. Rool in Donkey Kong Bananza? Now, Cranky's dialogue, when you meet him, it's very provocative. And yes, he could be referring to Voidco. He could. He's referring to a singular he of certain renown, which could be referring to that little Moglin-looking squirrel monkey, because that little squirrel monkey seems to be the head Voidco figure. He's on the little emblems and whatever his head is. So Cranky could just be referring to him and discounting the other two. That's possible, but he also makes another remark that I haven't read until now that seems a little bit coded. I don't know. Maybe this is just me using my fan brain and reading way too much into it, but in referring to this banana thief that Cranky is hunting, that he's chased into the underground world, Cranky says, "What a rotten crook. How does a fool like that command any respect?" Now, Josh, you tell me. I
have not seen that one.
Yeah, you tell me what you feel when you hear that statement. Aside from Cranky is reading the news about the tariffs, what do you think that could mean?
I mean, I guess what I'll say is that K. Rool being in this game is not going to make or break it for me, I don't think.
Okay.
I would like to see him. I would like to have him there. It would be great if he was in it. But if he's not, I'm sure I'm going to love it either way.
Sure.
Or at least I believe I am right now. It's not like I said, it's not going to make or break it to me. But I say that to then follow it up by saying, I agree with you that there's a lot of signs pointing to it and something's not quite adding up.
There's literally a sign pointing to it in Odyssey.
There is, yeah. And just, I don't think that you're being too fan-brained in reading into Cranky's dialogue like that. I think it sort of strikes me the same way the fact that we haven't seen the Style Shop at all does, where it's like, there is something to this that you guys aren't telling us, but you're alluding to it enough to make us wonder.
Mm-hmm. Well, I talked about how the Buzzoids resemble Zingers. Let's talk about the Crocoids.
Sure.
Now, the Crocoids, they were spotted by fans in the trailer very early on, and people were like, hold up, wait a second, are they Kremlings? Are they referencing Kremlings? What the hell is happening? The Crocoids, and by the way, Crocoid is spelled Crockoids, which, interesting that they put a K in there, not, front loading it with a K. The Crocoids are these, like, skeletal, golden, crocodile, humanoids. They sort of look like a cross between a Kremlin and a Skelly from off of Sea of Thieves. But I think that it's weird because they're not calling them Kremlings. And so like part of me is like, well, then they're not Kremlings, because why would they do this song and dance? But I'm thinking, and I've been thinking this for a while, Josh, that there's a good possibility that what's going to happen is a compromise. Just like the new Donkey Kong design splits the difference between the Kev Bayless design and the Miyamoto Donkey Kong 94 design to kind of create a hybridization that is supposed to bridge the divide. That going forward with Nintendo EPD developing the Donkey Kong series, we would have K. Rool as a reoccurring character and maybe even the antagonist, but the Kremlings themselves might not come back. The Kremlings themselves might sort of be left to the side or left behind a little bit, which, I mean, thematically would fit with what we have seen in the series with where we left them. The Kremling crew is decimated for the most part. Donkey Kong Country 2 was kind of a killing blow that just took a long time to really like finally do them in. So I could very well see K. Rool scheming and conniving away from the Kremling crew, getting into new sorts of trouble, making new alliances, building new enemies to further his agenda. I don't know.
It's also interesting that at least in the fossils we've seen so far, the fossils we've seen haven't been like actual Kremlings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they've
like
been,
we've seen Naughties.
Naughties.
Yeah,
sure.
we've seen Naughties, which are like affiliated with the Kremling crew. But yeah, now the Crocoids, they come in just like the golden skeletal form, but they can also be wearing exoskeletons. And these exoskeletons are giant crocodilian statues that Donkey Kong then has to break. Donkey Kong Smash. And there's been a lot of trying to suss out if there's any references in these exoskeletons. And there's one exoskeleton type that's the more indestructible stone. And
right.
This is covered in a pattern. This indestructible stone is covered in a pattern. It is destructible. You just have to, work harder at it. But
right.
People are saying, oh my God, that's the pattern from King K. Rool's cape, which, yes, it is. But that pattern is also the same as the girder pattern from Donkey Kong 1981. And I don't know if that was a deliberate reference when they designed K. Rool, or if it's just a weird coincidence. But I'm not seeing necessarily K. Rool's cape pattern. I'm seeing the girders. And that would make sense with a more indestructible, like an almost steel alloy. That would make sense. Now, that being said, one of the Crocoid exoskeletons fights DK with a big, rocky, giant red boxing glove, singular.
And also, we were discussing the enemies earlier and how they seem to be taking a back seat. That fight was kind of the exception. Like, that looked really, really fun and really interesting. And, like, the way that the skeleton, like, once it was actually revealed, like, I feel like it was kind of, like, unexpectedly disturbing in the way that it looked and moved. Like, in the context of this otherwise very cartoony game. And I thought that was really, really effective.
Yeah. Also, on the Crocoid exoskeleton, or at least in the really fancier one with the, like, steel alloy and the girder / K. Rool's cape pattern, they look like they have a golden cuff on their regular arm. A golden cuff just like K. Rool wears. Which could also be a reference to K. Rool, but it could also not mean anything. They're just referencing K. Rool because they're Donkey Kong fans. But I don't know, Josh. I don't know.
If I had to lay down odds, I would say that it's more likely than not. By the way, somebody, let's see. Where was this? This is a little while ago. Mark Rose 2011 in the chat said, and we need to we need to make sure this is accurate. They said, I just saw someone found a screenshot of the Japanese website that said Voidco's identity and purpose is unknown. So who exactly was Cranky referring to when he knew who the Banana Bandit was?
Yes. So thank you, March Rose, for bringing that up. Thank you, Josh, for reading that comment. It's been a lot to keep up with. And this episode is far more polished than my just free-wheeling rambling session with Malik when I was still in Trailer Fugue. But I have, like, forgotten to bring stuff up, and that's something I did want to bring up, is I've seen it, and for good reason. I've seen a bandy that Cranky could be referring to Voidco because Cranky knows shit. Cranky, yeah, he's a cranky little bitch, but he's also a wise elder. And
even if it's not K. Rool, the fact that Cranky has some sort of established history with this is like just a really cool detail in and of itself.
Yeah, I've seen comparisons made. And when I say I've seen comparisons made, I've made the comparisons, and then I read my comments to the beginning of Tropical Freeze, where the snowmads are rolling in, and all four Kongs have a different reaction. Donkey and Diddy look concerned. Donkey looks a little angry. Diddy looks a little frightened. Dixie is elated because it means bad shit is happening, and yay, adventure. And Cranky's the only one who knows exactly who they are. And he's like, oh, God damn it, these shit faces. Here we go. Which is just a subtle little animation detail, but it speaks volumes in a game that doesn't have much dialogue. So
that's really cool. I'd noticed Dixie before, but I don't think I'd ever noticed that about Cranky.
So I do appreciate the idea that Cranky could already know about Voidco. But if they are mysterious, if they are this new entity that are like making their presence known with this assault on Ingot Isle and their play for the Banandium, or maybe even something else. We keep talking about the Banandium, but that's a lot of MacGuffin for this underground world. If it was in Ingot Isle and pushed down, what else is happening in the underground world? Josh? What else could be down there? What relation might the Crocoids have with the Kremlings? The Kremlings, might I add, who, according to Donkey Kong Country 2, they were born from the Kremlin source in the Kremlin Lost World, which was also an underground, like, undiscovered kingdom.
Right.
That had lush jungles, icy caverns, volcanoes. Interesting. This is my fan brain talking. This isn't an actual prediction. I'm getting a little carried away here. I'm like a Sonic the Hedgehog comic book writer who's writing for the games now. What if K. Rool is trying to find the Kremlin source? What if he's trying to dig deep enough to restore the Kremlin source and restore the Kremlins? Oh my God.
The way that I would do that is I'd have you you're playing through like a section of a level and you come across like that distinct rainbow pattern. And it's all gameplay. The game itself does not allude to it. Like if you know, you know, and if you don't, it's fine because you're about to find out. But just how exciting would that be?
Or you just hear a few notes of the Lost World anthem.
Yeah. Oh my God. There's so many cool things they could do with that. And that is assuming, one, that K. Rool is there, and two, that they're going to preserve the mystery, until the game is actually out.
Yeah.
But if that's what you want to do, there's some cool things you could do there.
I think that at the end of the day, K. Rool could very well be there. Even if he's not the primary antagonist, he could be... Cranky's there for some reason. And I think K. Rool could be up to something somewhere in the underground world. And I don't want to raise expectations too highly. And if you are just a K. Rool fan, if you are just a Kremlin fan, and you want K. Rool more than anything, I know it's disappointing that they're playing the shell game right now. If
K. Rool is your version of the roll jump.
Right. I do understand that. And I'm sorry that the big return of Donkey Kong is mired in these same old controversies. But I also would not worry about K. Rool's future in the series. I know that's weird to say if he's not in this big new Donkey Kong game, but I think to a point, or rather to make a point to something Snake Fighter was saying earlier in the chat, is this going to be the direction of Donkey Kong going forward? No, not necessarily. Like, Donkey Kong isn't just going to be about smashing rocks and digging down deep beneath the earth. That's not Donkey Kong's future. That's the big new 3D Donkey Kong game. Just like Mario isn't about traversing planetoids across the galaxy or like going to different areas around the globe or going to a tropical island. Like, this is just 3D Donkey Kong and what 3D Donkey Kong is today. And what are they going to follow this game with? Well, probably a 2D Donkey Kong Country game. And we've seen that there will be people at Nintendo EPD who would really want to make that game.
Yeah, it does seem like that is very well clarified as the distinction now, that Donkey Kong Country games are 2D platformers. And we can only say that now because we have two examples of 3D Donkey Kong games that both don't use the country title.
Yes. But the country title is still in use. It's the name of the theme park. It's not going away. But Donkey Kong Country is a signifier of what this Donkey Kong game is. So, yeah, I am pretty excited about this game, about the future of Donkey Kong. I can't wait to find out more about it. And I can't wait for the hype cycle to progress.
Yeah, it's really remarkably nice just to have a new Donkey Kong game to talk about it all after all this time.
Yeah.
And while the initial trailer did give me some apprehension, and I was a little on the fence about, like, okay, I need to wait and see more. I need more context for some of this stuff. The more we found out, and especially just seeing the Treehouse stream, I am just so incredibly excited to play this, and I'm really, really looking forward to it.
So am I. And look, this is just the beginning. We are doing way more episodes of Donkey Kong Bananza on this. Somebody, of course, said, how does it feel to actually have a new Donkey Kong game for the Kongversation? You know, the first new standalone one since Tropical Freeze. And I'm like, yeah, it's going to be very easy to come up with episode topics for a while.
Yeah.
And it's not like we're not going to do other topics. We're going to talk about Mario Kart World. We're going to talk about Yuka Replayly. We will occasionally do a nostalgia episode, your spotlights and what have you. But yeah, we are going to do so many episodes about Donkey Kong Bananza from here through release. And that brings me to my next point. We got over 50 calls for this episode, Josh.
That's okay. So we've gotten like at least 10 more since the first time you told me that.
My phone was still ringing. The hotline was still ringing while we were recording the first hour of the episode.
God.
So I apologize to everyone who called into this episode because I am not going to take a single call on this episode. It's a very late in the day editorial decision I made for the integrity of this episode because I know how Josh and I operate, and I knew we were going to go long, and I knew we were going to be so tired by the time we even got to the calls, and I knew there's no way I could even play all the calls we had yesterday, let alone the calls we got since then. And I'm probably not even going to be able to call them in the future, but what I'm going to do is I am going to have a specific call sack episode for Donkey Kong Bananza. In the next couple of weeks, we will just sit back and respond to listener calls about Donkey Kong Bananza. And these calls will range anywhere from immediately after the trailer, before we knew anything, up until like probably right before the episode records. So
we have 50 now. By then we may have double that.
I'm going to have to weed through the calls. I'm going to have to listen to them in advance. I can't play all those calls, but We will do a Cul-de-sac episode. People are free to call in. Just don't put any great faith in your call being chosen. I apologize. 1-202-630-VINE 8463. The Cul-de-sac episode will happen. So Josh, what do we think of the box art of the game? It hasn't been something we've really discussed yet.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the box art's actually a really great example of what I was talking about earlier in the episode about how, like, this new Donkey Kong model can still totally hit the way that I want Donkey Kong to hit. I love the box art.
I really do like the box art. It's a grower, not a shower, as they say. It's not something that immediately jumped out at me like, that's a Donkey Kong box art. Like, that's a classic box art. But it's very striking. I love the orange and gold and like the contrast against the all black background. I love the expression Donkey Kong is making on it because it does seem to really show off the new design, but also make sure it retains enough of the old design. So it's not going to be completely foreign to people going in.
I think seeing that box art was probably the exact moment where I was like, oh yeah, this is good. This is cool. I can.
Yeah.
To quote Captain Sisko, I can live with it.
That's right. Deep Space Nine might actually be one of the layers in this game because they seem to number them. Yeah. Now, I also love the logo. I love the new Donkey Kong typeface that they've been using since early last year with Mario versus Donkey Kong. And I really like the way Bananza looked. I like that it's rocky, but I like that it's yellow tinted as a banana. It's just wonderful.
It is very, very, for lack of a better term, Donkey Kong centric.
Yeah.
In that, like, it sells him. It sells him as a character.
Yeah.
Like you said earlier, it's not like a classic Donkey Kong box art. And, those tended to be, like character pieces. Like you'd see multiple characters in a specific setting, which made a lot of sense. The games were so sold on, the ACM pre-rendered graphics. Of course, you're going to want to show a lot of them off. But the box art in particular really seems to focus, on Donkey Kong, who he is and what he can do and what this game is, and like a preview of what you'll be doing a lot of in this game.
Yeah. And it's such just visually memorable as a design, and the color contrast even works well with the switch to red colored case.
Yeah, I just realized this is the first Switch 2 box I will have ever seen. Is this box art?
Now, I have to be honest though. I am really, really worrying about not being able to get a Switch 2 in time for this game. Like, yeah. I'm starting to have legit anxiety and dread about it because there are tariffs. We now don't know how much the Switch 2 is going to cost or when we'll even be able to pre-order it. And that's going to create artificial scarcity. And the cost alone is... Like, I don't want to wade into the waters of politics, and I promised I would stay away from it, but this directly impacts our fandom, our hobby, if you are in the States. But even then, on a more, like, macro level, it does impact things. If the Switch 2 bombs in the States because of all of this nonsense, that will directly impact Nintendo. That will directly, potentially impact Donkey Kong.
Yeah, I mean, I said this on the Geek Critique server too. Talking about this is not like violating some tenet of like we're not going to talk about politics.
Yeah,
because this impacts the things that we focus on and the things that we do. And I mean, I have the same anxieties.
Yeah, I am. Like, I was having anxiety about it already because times are tough, and I am cash strapped. I'm a Donkey Kong journalist. I'm an independent Donkey Kong journalist, so I did it to myself. But, I'm... It kind of sucks, the irony of it, that I'm the person who breathlessly followed the existence of the game. I helped break the story for everyone. When it was just a gleam in Nintendo's eye, I was getting the word out there that this was coming. I have kept the Donkey Kong podcast going for over 12 years, despite the last new standalone game coming out in season 1 of the show. And I might not be able to get to play the game when it comes out. I might not get to actually engage with content and creating the stuff I want to make for my audience because I don't have the money to buy this. I am full of kind of ennui about it right now. And,
right.
You know, it's the idiotic political situation and then just the resulting sheer cost of the system and game. Like, do I need to do a charity drive? Do I need to beg for money? Like, more money? Like, it's already enough that I have the Patreon and I already feel like a little guilt about that, but at least that's couched in the creator, hustle market mindset and whatever, but it's like, well, please help this poor man buy a Switch too. Oh, he's just a little baby.
I mean, I think that while at one time on the internet, people were very concerned, and not just on the internet, but in society in general, people were very concerned about quote unquote selling out, that you should do it for the love of the game, and that there was some sort of a shame in like doing things like that. I think people broadly understand the socioeconomic situation that we find ourselves in now. Like, YouTubers never get flack for trying to raise money or say taking sponsorships anymore. Whereas, I think even when I started doing YouTube, that would have been that would have really been looked down upon. So, I don't think anybody would see it as begging for money. I see, like, I'm saying this as a fan of DKVine and not just, somebody who knows and likes you. Like, being able to make sure that the head of DKVine gets to play this game that he has spent years hyping us up for and, like, making and, like, restoring hope to the fandom and, nobody, I don't think anybody would see it as you doing anything remotely untoward. And I think everybody would be very happy to help ensure that, like, you get a Switch too, and that you get to play this, and that you get to cover this. I know I would.
This is why I didn't want it to be a launch title. God damn it. Moving beyond my own petty concerns, right. Where are we at with the game? Final thoughts about where we are at the end of, we're recording this April 4th, where we're at with the game, because anxiety about actually being able to own it when it's relevant aside, dude, I'm so excited. Like, I've gone from being on the fence with that initial reveal, happy that Donkey Kong EPD was finally here, but feeling a little bit of Jungle Beat scaries, the despair, the despair I would feel when I saw Monkey Island crossing over a Sea of Thieves, or the reinvention of Donkey Kong's world visually in Kingdom Battle. It's like, why do we always have to reinvent DK's aesthetic, world, and cast with each new game? Why is the rare properties in the DKU, why is that never good enough? Why is everything else able to be revered? And why are we always just being happy and grateful for the little scraps we get? And I don't know, I'm comforted now. At the very least that, our reporting was accurate. This team does have the love and dedication to Donkey Kong that we were told they did. And it's impossible at this stage to really do a one-to-one comparison with what returning things we knew were in returns at this stage versus the things here. But compared to Jungle Beat, so much. I mean, the dithered plastic palm trees alone, my God.
Yeah, I'm looking at the screenshot, and it's just, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
I never thought a Donkey Kong game would have any segments that would look like that again. I just got done saying, I was getting footage of Killer Instinct 2 the other day, and I was just, like, looking at the ACM models, and just being like, wow, Rare didn't really utilize this after Killer Instinct. Like, it was never utilized on the N64, and for good reason, but it's like, I would have really loved to have seen a game with more horsepower use this kind of visual style, this kind of model rendering. And I'm just nostalgic for it. Yeah, like, I know it's inferior, but I just love the way it looks. And oh my God, a Donkey Kong game is going back to that, at least in these little segments. That's amazing.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I'm really interested to see like what, because I do assume that there will be more of these than just what we saw in that brief shot of the trailer. Like, what else are we gonna see? What else are we gonna reference? Like, what else?
Yeah.
And that's really exciting.
This team clearly loves Donkey Kong. At the end of the day, I don't think that will be disputed. They love Rare's Donkey Kong and what came before. Like, there's no artificial dividing line on when their love for Donkey Kong stops. Like, you can go all the way back and there's appreciation for it. From the arcade era through the Rare era, we've seen potentially an Oinks fossil, so through the retro era. Shigeru Miyamoto never hated Donkey Kong Country, and I do hope that Donkey Kong Bonanza will finally validate all of us who have been trying to put that rumor to rest.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think it will. I think also that, like, the difference between this and Jungle Beat isn't just that this team loves Donkey Kong. It's also this, there's a sense of reverence for it. That, and I'm not dissing Jungle Beat necessarily. It's more like, when Jungle Beat was being developed, it hadn't been long enough since Donkey Kong Country for the people who grew up loving Donkey Kong Country to really get very far into the industry.
Yeah.
And now it absolutely has been, and you can really see that with this. You can really see, one of the first episodes I was on was about Sonic Mania, and about how much love and reverence and appreciation that team had for their era of Sonic, and how they were able to realize that and redeem it and make it, as Reggie said, make it magic again. Mm-hmm. And I really think that while it may not be exactly what we expected in every way, while it may not be, the I couldn't have made that any better myself feeling that, say, like the K. Rool trailer gave us, I do think this game is going to absolutely realize and respect and capture the legacy and the history of Donkey Kong, while also, forging a completely new path. And I feel very lucky that we've made it here. I feel very lucky that we have this. And I'm really just excited to see where it goes and to experience it and get to play it for myself.
Yeah. Well, if you'll excuse me, Josh, I need to go sling meth on the streets to be able to afford a Switch too.
I think if we coordinate, like, maybe we can meet up in person and we can, we can, like, I can have a section and you can have a section. We put our heads together and we can split the profits.
There's really no bad outcome to this plan.
I can't think of anything bad ever happening from selling meth, no.
Bravo, Vine.
This has been a File 2 production.
Qué rico.